Chapter 12, Social Psychology. Time now is 4:37 a.m. Today is Wednesday, July 15th, 2026. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Psychology, 4th edition. The time now is 4:38 a.m. Today is Wednesday, July 15th, 2026. Chapter 12, Social Psychology. Narrated by Omar Mohsen Ibrahim Fouad. Chapter 12, Social Psychology. Chapter outline and learning objectives. An introduction to social psychology. LO1 defines social psychology and identify how it differs from sociology. LO2 define social cognition and describe how we use attributions to explain behavior. LO3 describes several common attribution errors. Social influence. LO4 explain the meaning of social influence and recognize factors associated with persuasion. LO5 define compliance and explain some of the techniques used to gain it. LO6 identify the factors that influence the likelihood of something conforming. LO7 describe obedience and explain how Stanley Milgram studied it. Groups and aggression. LO8 recognize factors that influence the bystander effect. LO9 define aggression and identify some of its causes. LO10 defines stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination. Pro-social behavior, attraction, and love. LO11 describe altruism. LO12 identify the three major factors contributing to the interpersonal attraction. An introduction to social psychology is the swipe right. It was an unusually hot evening in Escondido, California, and Alexa Antoni was rushing for her first date with Dennis Conforti, whom she had met on the dating app Tinder. Approaching the meeting place, Alexa suddenly felt unsure. It was a small restaurant tucked in between an abandoned car lot and a tire sales place. Oh my gosh, he's going to kill me. Dennis was sitting in the back corner sipping a drink and listening to the band. The first thing Alexa noticed was how relaxed and happy he appeared. I remember he wasn't nervous, says Alexa. It was almost like he was there enjoying it, even without me being there, which was refreshing. The profile photos. These are the Tinder profile pictures that helped bring together Dennis on the left and Alexa on the right at the left in the photo. The date went well. Alexa appreciated how Dennis was kind to the waitress without being a flirt. He was witty and attractive and exuded a calm self-confidence. Alexa hoped to see Dennis again and learn more about him, but after a brief text exchange, things just fizzled out. What was the story with Dennis? Note, quotations attributed to Julius Atchen and Alexa and Dennis Conforti are personal communications. What is social psychology? As it turned out, Dennis was equally interested in Alexa. She was smart, beautiful, he recalls. I really liked her, but in between a full-time job in the Marine Corps, classes at Palomar College, family obligations, and a 4-week-old puppy, Dennis barely had any free time. Not knowing all these details, Alexa could only speculate about the reasons Dennis hadn't reached out. Trying to understand people's actions, thoughts, and feelings in response to others is something we all do on a regular basis. This is also a major area of interest for those who study social psychology. LO1 defines social psychology and identify how it differs from sociology. Social psychology is the study of human cognition, emotion, and behavior in relation to others. Observe closely, and you'll find connections to social psychology in stories throughout this book. In the Sensation and Perception chapter, for example, we journeyed into the world of Mandy Harvey, a jazz singer who is completely deaf. How might Mandy's social interactions differ from those of a singer without hearing loss? Then there was Clive Waring from the Memory chapter. How do you suppose Clive's devastating memory loss affects his relationships? Social psychologists strive to answer these types of questions. Many times, we have emphasized the importance of the biopsychosocial perspective, which recognizes the biological, psychological, and social factors underlying human behavior. This chapter focuses on the third aspect of that triad, social forces. A social contagion. Humans, lions, chimpanzees, and other highly social animals experience yawn contagions, according to Juice 2022, paragraph 7. Why do yawns spread through groups? This is just the kind of question that draws the interest of social psychologists, because they're contagious. How is it different from sociology? Students often ask how social psychology differs from the field of sociology. The answer is simple. Social psychology explores the way individuals behave, think, and feel in relation to others and groups. According to Goldwitzer and Barge, 2018, sociology centers on examining the groups themselves, their societies, cultures, and intuitions. A social psychologist studying religion might focus on the relationship between individual congregants and their spiritual leaders. A sociologist would more likely investigate religious practices, rituals, and organizations. Research with a twist. Like all psychologists, social psychologists use a variety of research methods, including surveys. Like all psychologists, social psychologists use a variety of research methods, including surveys, naturalistic observation, and the experimental method. But their studies sometimes have an added twist of deception. In some cases, deception is necessary because people do not always behave naturally when they know they are being observed. According to Lasser et al. 2020, participants may try to conform to expectations or do just the opposite. Behave in ways they believe will contradict the researchers' predictions. Suppose researchers are studying the facial expressions of people drinking alcohol and listening to jokes, according to Fairbairn et al. 2020 and Sayet et al. 2019. If participants know that every smile is being analyzed, they may feel self-conscious. And display atypical feature expressions instead of revealing the real focus on their investigation. Researchers might lead participants to believe they are studying someone else. Instead of revealing the real focus of their investigation, researchers might lead participants to believe they are studying something else, like reaction time. That way, they can examine the behavior of interest, facial expressions in social settings more naturally. Connections. In Chapter 1, we describe the Hawthorne effect. When research participants know they are being observed, their behavior changes. Here we explain how deception is used to minimize the Hawthorne effect. Social psychology studies often involve Confederates or people secretly working for the researchers, playing the role of participants, experimenters, or simply bystanders. Confederates Playing the role of participants, experimenters, or simply bystanders, Confederates say what the researchers tell them to say and do what the researchers tell them to do. Playing the role of participants, experimenters, or simply bystanders, Confederates say what the researchers tell them to say and do what Confederates say what the researchers tell them to say and do what the researchers tell them to do. Social psychology studies often involve Confederates, or people secretly working for the researchers, playing the role of participants, experimenters, or simply bystanders. Confederates say what the researchers tell them to say and do what the researchers tell them to do. They are unknown to the participants, just part of the researchers' experimental manipulation. In most cases, the deception is not kept a secret forever. Researchers debrief their participants at the end of a study, that is, review aspects of the research initially kept under wraps. Even after learning they were deceived, many participants say they would be willing to take part in subsequent psychology experiments, according to Blatchley and O'Brien, 2007. College students, who are frequently participants in research, may be inclined to believe that the use of deception is justified, according to Lasser, ETAL, 2020, page 20. Debriefing is also a time when researchers make sure that participants were not harmed or upset by their involvement in a study. We should note that all psychology research affiliated with colleges and universities must be approved by an Institutional Review Board, IRB, to ensure that no harm will come from participation. Additionally, psychologists must follow ethical guidelines to safeguard the welfare of those involved in their research. These requirements are partly a reaction to early studies involving extreme deception and manipulation, studies that many viewed as dehumanizing and unethical. Psychologists agree that deception is only acceptable if there is no other way to study the topic of interest. We will describe many examples of such research in the upcoming pages, but first let's familiarize ourselves with some basic concepts in social psychology. We'll get started with a little help from Dennis and Alexa. Date 2, Make It or Break It. Date 2, Make It or Break It. About 2 weeks after their first date, Dennis finally texted Alexa, hoping she wouldn't think he was a total jerk for waiting so long. Alexa responded, but she had already been on another Tinder date with a different person and did not have high expectations for date 2 with Dennis. Their second meeting was a big success. However, we were able to kind of ask the tough questions, says Dennis, who told Alexa he had been married and explained some of the reasons for his divorce. Alexa described her motivation for becoming a social worker. She's just a very kind-hearted person, says Dennis, who was beginning to see the potential for a relationship. He asked Alexa for another dinner date, but this time at his old house so she could meet his puppy. This made Alexa feel a bit on edge. Usually, if a guy invites you over, they are expecting a lot. Tinder is going strong. Tinder is extremely popular among people ages 18 through 25, Gen Z. Survey data indicate that most of these young singles value authenticity, prioritizing qualities like loyalty and respect above physical appearance. What's more, many Gen Zers find it attractive when someone is opening to work on their mental well-being, according to Tinder 2023, paragraph 4. Why do people do the things they do? LO2 defines social cognition and describe how we use attributions to explain behavior. Alexa Barley knew Dennis, but he seemed like a gentle soul, or perhaps a really good actor. On a conscious level, she was processing all sorts of information she had picked up by observing Dennis, namely through his words and behaviors. There was also some information processing occurring outside of her awareness. It is possible that Dennis reminded her of someone she knew, perhaps a family member, and that sense of familiarity made her more inclined to trust him. Ultimately, she accepted his invitation. Alexa's decision relied on social cognition, the way one thinks about others, attends to social information, and uses this information in life. Both consciously and unconsciously, you use social cognition all the time, whether you are trying to infer what another person is thinking by looking in their eyes or to understand what they are feeling using cues in the social environment, according to Schur's ETAL 2021. One critical component of social cognition is the process of making attributions or explaining the behavior of others. Connections. In the Cognition, Language, and Intelligence chapter, we define cognition as the mental activity associated with obtaining, storing, converting, and using knowledge. Thinking is a type of cognition that involves coming to a decision, forming a belief, or developing an attitude. In this section, we examine how we think about social information. What are attributions? As you probably know, the dating game typically involves a lot of guesswork about other people's behavior. Why did Dennis take so long to text? What did Alexa mean by that? She included at the end of her message. What did Alexa mean by that emoji of a face with a concerned look? What did she mean by that in her message? What did Alexa mean by that emoji with the concerned look she included at the end of her message? These kinds of questions are relevant to all human relationships, but not just the romantic kind. Just think about how much time you spend wondering why people do the things they do. The answers you come up with are called attributions. Why is my friend in such a bad mood? You ask yourself. Your attribution might be maybe he just got some bad news, or perhaps he is hungry. Attributions are the beliefs we develop to explain human behaviors and characteristics, as well as situations. When psychologists characterize attributions, they use the term observer to identify the person making the attribution and actor to identify the person exhibiting the behavior of interest. If Alexa is trying to figure out why Dennis took so long to text, then Alexa is the observer and Dennis is the actor. Types of attributions. Psychologists often describe attributions along three dimensions: controllable, uncontrollable, stable, unstable, and internal, external. Let's examine how these might apply to attributions relating to Alexa and to Dennis. Controllable, uncontrollable dimension. Alexa was 15 minutes late to her first date with Dennis. If Dennis assumed it was because she got stuck in unavoidable traffic, we would say he was making an uncontrollable attribution. If he assumed that Alexa's lateness resulted from factors within her control, such as how fast she drove or what time she left work, then the attribution would be controllable. Stable, unstable dimension. According to Alexa, Dennis turned out to be a pretty good cook. If she inferred that his success in the kitchen stemmed from a long-time interest in cooking, the attribution would be stable. The cause is long-lasting. If she thought it resulted from a short-lived inspiration after watching an episode of Next Level Chef, then her attribution would be unstable. If she thought it resulted from a short-lived inspiration after watching an episode of Next Level Chef, then her attribution would be unstable. The cause is temporary. Internal, external dimension. Before meeting Dennis, Alexa had bad luck on Tinder. Why was this so? If Dennis thought it was because most guys on Tinder are creepy, this would be an external attribution because the cause of the problem resided. If Dennis thought it was because most guys on Tinder are creepy, this would be an external attribution because the cause of the problem resides. If Dennis thought it was because most guys on Tinder are creepy, this would be an external attribution because the cause of the problem resides outside of Alexa. If he believed Alexa was unsuccessful because she was reluctant to explore new relationships, this would be an internal attribution. The cause lies within Alexa. Put your heads together. Suppose your instructor assigns a group project. One of the students in your group contributes virtually nothing to the endeavor. Team up and explain this behavior using A, several attributions that are external, uncontrollable, and unstable, and B, several attributions that are internal, controllable, and stable. C, consider how your emotional reactions might differ if you think the cause of your classmates' inactivity is A versus B. Now that we have explored various types of attributions, let's consider some ways they may relate to your life online. Didn't see that coming. How beauty filters may backfire. Think about the last time you posted a photo or video of yourself on Instagram or TikTok. What was your motivation for doing so? For most of us, the primary goal is to make a good impression, to appear attractive, confident, and likable. To this end, you may have used one of the numerous beauty filters available through such apps. These AI technologies work in real time, soothing your skin, whitening your teeth, adding makeup, and in some cases, changing your face in ways that could be achieved only with cosmetic surgery, according to Marr 2023 and Sullivan 2023. The problem is that most people viewing your content know that you may have manipulated it, and this may lead to unfavorable attributions. For example, viewers assume you are a bit vain, an internal and stable attribution. In fact, research shows that filtered selfies posted on Instagram receive fewer likes than natural selfies. That is, there is an inverse relationship between use of filters and a number of likes. Meanwhile, there is a positive correlation between the presence of social cues and the number of likes. Social cues are pieces of information that reveal something about a person, in this case, the selfie taker. For example, a fitness enthusiast might snap a selfie wearing exercise gear or showing workout equipment in the background. These types of cues offer a window into the person's life and indicate eagerness to interact, a sentiment that can lead to higher audience interest and favorability. According to Hong et al. 2020, page 3. Overall, the findings suggest that you can make a good impression by posting selfies that reveal who you really are, not some idealized version of yourself. Easy on the filters. If you're trying to make a good impression, try posting a photo that shows your authentic self, photo on the left, as opposed to one that has been heavily filtered on the right. A study of more than 2,000 Instagram posts found that filtered selfies reviewed fewer likes than unfiltered ones. It also has to do with attributions. When people see an image with obvious enhancements, they tend to perceive this as ingenuine behavior because it reflects the intent to only present the ideal depiction of self, according to Hong et al. 2020, page 5. LO3 describes several common attribution errors, whether online or in person. Making attributions about human behavior often involves some degree of speculation. This, of course, leaves plenty of room for error. Let's take a look at 4 of the most common mistakes. Infographic 12.1. Fundamental attribution error. Suppose you are hosting a party tomorrow night. You emailed invitations a month ago, and everyone responded, "Expect your friend Julia." If you automatically assume Julia failed to reply because she is a little snooty and thinks she's too good for your party, rather than considering situational factors like the fact that your invitation may have gone straight into her spam folder, then you might be falling prey to the fundamental attribution error. Here the tendency is to use dispositional attributions rather than situational attributions. A dispositional attribution is a particular type of internal attribution wherein behaviors are assumed to result from traits and personality characteristics. These are deep-seated, enduring characteristics as opposed to more transient states like feeling tired and cranky. A situational attribution is an external attribution wherein behaviors are assumed to result from situational factors. The fundamental attribution error is common. We often assume people's behaviors are caused by personal characteristics, a dispositional attribution, rather than factors in the environment. A situational attribution, according to Ross 1977, 2018, and Ross, Amabile, and Steinmetz 1977. For example, people sometimes assume that poverty results from personal characteristics, dispositional factors such as laziness and lack of motivation, but a closer look at economic variables seems to suggest that situational factors play a more important role. According to Engler et al. 2020, as of the printing of this book, the federal minimum wage is $7.25 per hour. If you work at this rate full time, 40 hours per week without taking any weeks off, your annual salary is $15,080, which is less than the poverty threshold for a single person with no dependents, according to U.S. Census Bureau 2023. Since 1973, American productivity has increased by 77%, while hourly pay has grown by only 12%, according to Desmond 2018, paragraph 10. In an economy with this degree of wage growth, working hard may not be enough to escape the grip of poverty. Imagine how dangerous the fundamental attribution error could be in a medical setting when doctors and nurses need to make quick choices about treatment. When presented with a patient who has slurred speech, difficulty walking, and aggressive behavior, a healthcare worker might assume they are a drunk alcoholic and when presented with a patient who has slurred speech, difficulty walking, and aggressive behavior, a healthcare worker might assume they are a drunk alcoholic and ignore situational factors such as homelessness and severe dehydration. According to Livette Jones et al. 2010, in fact, studies show that medical workers frequently perceive patients with substance use disorders as dangerous, untrustworthy, and responsible for their disorder, according to Hamilton et al. 2023, page 735. Having personal contact with people affected by substance use disorders may reduce the likelihood of these immediate judgments, but it is important to recognize that healthcare workers are vulnerable to attribution errors just like the rest of us, according to Hamilton et al. 2023. What other professionals make decisions that impact the well-being of others, and how might the fundamental attribution error lead to mistakes? Why do we fall prey to the fundamental attribution error? Perhaps it has something to do with our illusion of personal objectivity. We deem our own perceptions to be accurate and unbiased, and assume people with opposing views are irrational and biased, according to Ross 2018, page 775. The good news is that we may be able to combat this way of thinking with training exercises. For example, one group of researchers put college students and social workers through a poverty simulation that helped them understand the day-to-day challenges faced by people with low income. As a result of this intervention, the participants, especially the college students, began to focus less on dispositional. As a result of this intervention, the participants, especially the college students, began to focus less on dispositional characteristics and more on situational factors, according to Engler et al. 2020. Other researchers are exploring strategies to help medical professionals combat the fundamental attribution error, including the use of educational video games for medical students. For clinicians who want to reduce their cognitive biases, it may help to slow down, consider alternative diagnosis, and question hypotheses, among other things, according to O'Sullivan and Schofield 2018. Just world hypotheses. Another attribution error associated with biased belief systems is the just world hypotheses, which assumes that if people are suffering, they must have done something to deserve it, according to Rubin and Peplau, 1975. According to this view, the world is a fair place and bad things happen for no reason. Thus, when people are bad, it should be no surprise when things don't go well for them, according to Riggio and Garcia, 2009. In one study, researchers presented participants with a story about Alex, a 23-year-old who was hit by a car while walking home from a party. Alex, feeling woozy and off balance, fell onto the road and was struck by a driver who then fled the scene. In one version of the story, Alex's lack of coordination was caused by drinking alcohol. In another version, it resulted from eating or drinking something that interacted with his allergy medication. Participants who learned that Alex was intoxicated were more likely to hold him partly responsible for being a hit-and-run victim. Those given the alternative explanation that Alex was woozy from the allergy medication were less likely to blame him, according to Dyer et al. 2022. Why do people believe in the just world hypotheses? Maybe because it helps them understand events and feel in control of their lives, even though much of what happened is unpredictable and beyond their control, according to Strelin, 2018. Why do we blame victims? Workers in South Korea show their support for the Me Too movement, the global fight against sexual harassment and assault. In some cases, blame is placed on victims, and this tends to reduce the amount of blame assigned to perpetrators. According to Dyer et al. 2022, the tendency to assume that victims had it coming or did something to deserve abuse is an example of the just world hypotheses. Victim blaming can deter people from speaking out and seeking justice. False consensus effect. When trying to decipher the causes of other people's behaviors, we over-rely on knowledge about ourselves. This can lead to the false consensus effect, which is the tendency to overestimate the degree to which others think or act like we do. According to Ross, Green, and House, 1977, for example, people tend to believe that their favorite celebrities are more popular than they really are. I love Taylor Swift, as does everyone else. According to Collison, et al. 2021, the false consensus effect may also be apparent in beliefs about vaccines. I think the flu shot is dangerous, and most of my friends agree, according to De Bruin, et al. 2020. We seem to make such mistakes because we have an overabundance of information about ourselves and often limited information about others. Connections. In the Cognition, Language, and Intelligence chapter, we describe the availability heuristic. With this heuristic, we predict the probability of something happening based on how easily we can recall a similar event from the past. The false consensus effect may result partly from using the availability heuristic. We rely on information about ourselves because it is easy to recall, and thus overestimate the degree to which other people think and act like we do. Self-serving bias. People who attribute their success to internal characteristics and their failures to environmental factors may be prone to the self-serving bias. As research reveals, people exhibit a generalized tendency to attribute positive outcomes to themselves and negative outcomes to others, and this can impact the way they learn and interpret events, according to Dorfman, et al. 2019, page 523. Connections. In the personality chapter, we discuss locus of control or patterns of disbelief. In the personality chapter, we discuss locus of control or patterns of beliefs about where control resides. People with an internal locus of control believe they have control of their lives. People with an internal locus of control believe they have control over their lives. Those who fall prey to the self-serving bias appear to have an internal locus of control when it comes to explaining the reasons for their success. What's with the attitude? I am totally crazy about this guy. When Alexa arrived at Dennis's house for dinner, her worries evaporated. It was clear he just wanted to make a nice meal and help her relax after a stressful week. After the third date, it kind of took off from there. Alexa recalls about 2 months later, Dennis had to go into the field or train with the Marines for several days in a remote location. Being out of touch forced Alexa to recognize her feelings. Oh my gosh, I am totally crazy about this guy. When Dennis came home, the couple went to the beach, watched the sun set over the ocean, and had a long talk. They discussed their values and beliefs about raising children, caring for aging parents, and handling finances. We just ran the gamut of everything you could possibly run into if you continue a relationship, says Alexa. By the end of the conversation, it was clear that Alexa and Dennis shared many of the same attitudes. What are attitudes? Attitudes are the relatively stable thoughts, feelings, and responses we have toward people, situations, ideas, and things. According to Adjizin, 2001, and Wicker, 1969. Psychologists suggest that attitudes are composed of cognitive, affective, and behavioral components. Figure 12.1, the cognitive aspect refers to beliefs or ideas. What do you think about federal tax reform? Attitudes may also include an emotional evaluation, which is the affective component relating to mood or emotion. According to Adjizin, 2001. Do you have positive or negative feelings about universal health care? Feelings and beliefs guide the behavioral aspect of attitudes or the way we respond. How will you vote in the next election? Figure 12.1, attitudes. Attitudes are composed of cognitive, affective, and behavioral components. Cognitive and affective components usually guide the behavioral aspect of an attitude. Extended description for Figure 12.1, attitudes. The flowchart begins with a box labeled attitude toward personal debt and branches into three components. The cognitive component, beliefs and ideas, reads, I think it's unwise to carry a large amount of personal debt without a clear plan for repayment. The affective component, emotional evaluation, reads, I feel proud when I pay in full for purchases. And the behavior component, the way we respond, reads, I pay my credit card bill in full each month. I maintain a minimum balance in my back account for emergencies. I review my college loan situation regularly. Where do attitudes come from? Your attitudes about marijuana use, immigration, and many other issues are strongly influenced by your social experiences. This is even true of attitudes you are not aware of having about sexual orientation and race, for example, according to Charles Worth and Benaji, 2019. Attitudes develop through learning processes such as classical conditioning and observational learning. They are shaped not only by social interactions, but also through exposure to books, television, and social media. Although nurture appears to dominate in this arena, genetic factors play a role in shaping attitudes too. According to Hatimi, ETAL 2014 and 2015. Studies suggest that identical twins have more similar attitudes than fraternal twins on topics such as politics, roller coasters, loud music, and reading books, according to Hofer, ETAL 2020, Olson, ETAL 2021, and Verhulst, 2020. But, as researchers explain, a single gene or small group of genes does not directly influence ideological preferences, according to Hatimi, ETAL 2014, page 292. In all probability, attitudes result from an interaction between a large number of genes, perhaps thousands, and a variety of environmental factors, our genetic predispositions can influence the environments we create for ourselves, which in turn impact our attitudes, according to Hetemi et al. 2015. Connections. In the learning chapter, we describe how classical conditioning might instill emotions and influence attitudes toward product brands. Attitudes may also develop through observational learning. We observe the attitudes of family members and friends, and sometimes take on those attitudes ourselves. Connections. In the Cognition, Language, and Intelligence chapter, we explore the heritability of intelligence. Heritability is the degree to which hereditary factors are responsible for differences in physical and psychological characteristics in the population. Heritability research often involves comparing identical and fraternal twins, as this study on attitudes does. Can attitudes predict behavior? Not surprisingly, people are more likely to act on their attitudes when something important is at stake, like money. Imagine your college is holding a meeting to discuss the possibility of increasing student parking fees. What are the chances of your showing up to that meeting if you don't have a car? The greater personal investment you have in an issue, the more likely you are to act, according to Sivekic in Kreno 1982 and Steindl and Jonas 2015. Personal investment may also help explain anti-science attitudes. For example, a person who works in the coal or fossil fuel industry may dismiss climate science because it threatens their source of employment, according to Hornsey 2020. Similarly, one who enjoys e-cigarettes might ignore medical evidence suggesting that vaping poses serious health effects. We now know that attitudes can influence behaviors, but it is the opposite. We now know that attitudes can influence behaviors, but is the opposite true? That is, can behaviors shape attitudes? Read on. Think critically. Something doesn't feel right. Most would agree that it is wrong to cheat on a partner when you are in a monogamous relationship. Even so, some people contradict their beliefs by seeking sexual gratification outside their primary relationships. How do you think cheating makes a person feel? Inner conflict or inner turmoil are some words that come to mind, according to De Vries et al. 2023. The tension that results when a behavior, in this case cheating, clashes with an attitude, cheating is wrong, is known as cognitive dissonance, according to Aronson and Festinger 1958 and Festinger 1957. One way to reduce cognitive dissonance is to adjust the behavior, stop fooling around. Another approach is to change the attitude to better match the behavior. Cheating is okay because my partner isn't nice to me, they deserve this, according to Genfro et al. 2016. Such attitude shifts often occur without our awareness. I really should be studying. You know that studying ought to take priority over recreational activities. Yet you just can't resist watching TikTok videos at the library. This may create some cognitive dissonance. This may create some cognitive dissonance, which occurs when your behavior, watching videos, is inconsistent with your belief. Studying hard leads to good grades. You could reduce this cognitive dissonance in one of two ways. 1, by changing your behavior, putting down the phone and studying, or 2, by altering your belief. I actually study harder when I give myself TikTok breaks. Imagine for a moment you are a participant in a classic study on cognitive dissonance, according to Festinger and Carl Smith 1959. Researchers have assigned you to a very boring task, placing 12 objects on a tray and then putting them back on a shelf over and over again for a half hour. Upon finishing, you spend an additional half hour twisting 48 pegs ever so slightly, one peg at a time, again and again and again. How would you feel at the end of the hour? Pretty bored, right? Regardless of how you may feel about these activities, you have been paid $1 to convince someone else that they are a blast. I had a lot of fun doing this task. You say, it was intriguing, it was exciting. Festinger, according to Festinger and Carl Smith, 1959, page 205. Unless you like performing repetitive behaviors like a robot, we assume you would feel some degree of cognitive dissonance or tension resulting from this mismatch between your attitude, "Ugh, this activity is so boring," and your behavior saying, "I had so much fun." What could you do to reduce the cognitive dissonance? If you're like participants in Festinger and Carl Smith's study, you would probably adjust your attitude to better fit your claims. In other words, you would rate the task as more interesting than it actually was. Some of the participants in the study were paid $20 as opposed to $1. These individuals were less inclined to change their attitudes to match their claim that the activity was fun, a sign that they felt less cognitive dissonance. Apparently, the big bucks made it easier to justify their lies. I said I liked the boring task because I got paid $20, not because I actually liked it. And now, one more example to drive home the concept of cognitive dissonance. Imagine you are studying for an upcoming economics exam in the student cafe. A friend approaches, and the two of you start talking. Your friend says they took the same economics class last year, and they know for a fact that the professor doesn't change the exam from year to year. Then they proceed to tell you about specific questions from last year's exam. You begin to feel uneasy because you know that your instructor would consider this a form of cheating. Your behavior, listening to details about the exam, conflicts with your attitude. Cheating is wrong. Reducing the conflict between the attitude and behavior could be accomplished in one of two ways: by changing the attitude or by changing the behavior. Which path would you take? We have learned about cognitive processes that form the foundation of our social existence. Attributions help us make sense of events and behaviors, and attitudes provide continuity in the way we think and feel about the surrounding world. Now it's time to explore the ways other people influence our behaviors. Are you ready to meet runner extraordinaire Julius Achon? Show what you know. Question number 1. Blank is the study of individuals in relation to others and groups, whereas blank is the study of the groups themselves, including cultures and societies. Is the answer A, sociology, social psychology, B, social psychology, sociology, C, sociology, a Confederate, D, a Confederate, social psychology? The answer is B, social psychology and psychology. Social psychology is the study of individuals in relation to others and groups, whereas sociology is the study of the groups themselves, including cultures and societies. Question number 2. Blank are beliefs used to explain human behaviors and characteristics as well as situations. Is the answer attributions? Is the answer A, attributions, B, Confederates, C, dispositions, or D, attitudes? The answer is A, attributions. Attributions are beliefs used to explain human behaviors and characteristics as well as situations. Question number 3. Because of the fundamental attribution error, we tend to attribute causes of behaviors to the disposition of the person. Question number 4. Social psychology research occasionally employs some form of deception involving Confederates. How is this type of deception different from that used in a double-blind study? Social psychology studies often involve Confederates who are working for the researchers. Playing the role of participants, Confederates say what the researchers tell them to say and do what the researchers tell them to do. They are unknown to the other participants, just part of the researcher's experimental manipulation. In a double-blind study, neither participants nor researchers administering a treatment know who is getting the real treatment. Participants are told ahead of time that they might receive a placebo, but they do not necessarily know about Confederates until after the study is complete. Social influence. 11 orphaned children. In 1983, a 7-year-old boy in northern Uganda came down with the measles. The child was feverish and coughing. He appeared to be dying. In fact, he did die, or so the local villagers believed. They dug his grave, wrapped him in a burial cloth, and sang him a farewell song. Then, just as they were about to lower the body into the ground, someone heard a sneeze. A few moments later, another sneeze. Could it be hastily unwrapping the cloth? Could it be hastily unwrapping the cloth? The mourners found the children frantically kicking and crying. Could it be hastily unwrapping the cloth? The mourners found the child frantically kicking and crying. It's a good thing the boy sneezed that day at his funeral, as the world is a much happier place because he survived. His name is Julius Achon. Julius grew up in Awake, a village that had no electricity or running water. Life in Uganda is very tough, says Julius, who spent his childhood sleeping between 8 brothers and sisters on the floor of a one-bedroom hut. At age 12, Julius was kidnapped by a government opposition group known as the Lord's Resistance Army, LRA, and forced to become a child soldier. 3 months later, he escaped from the rebel camp and, running much of the distance, returned to his village some 100 miles away. After coming home, Julius began to run competitively. He ran 42 miles barefoot to his first major track meet in the city of Lyra. Hours after arriving, Julius was racing and winning the 800, 1500, and 3000 meter races. From that point, it was one success after another: a stunning victory at the national championships, a scholarship from George Mason University in the United States, a collegiate record in 1996, and participation in the 1996 and 2000 Olympics, according to Khan 2018. As awe-inspiring as these accomplishments may be, Julius' greatest achievements had little to do with running. In 2003, while training in Uganda, he came upon a bus station in Lyra. I stopped, and then I saw children lying under the bus, Julius says. One of them stood up and started to beg for money. Then more children emerged, 11 of them in all, some as young as 3. They were thin and dirty, and the little ones wore nothing more than long t-shirts and underwear. Where are your parents? Julius remembers asking. One of the children said their parents had been killed. Can I walk you to my home, to go eat? Julius asked. The children eagerly agreed and followed him home for a meal of rice, beans, and porridge. What happened next may seem unbelievable, but Julius and his family are extraordinary people. Julius asked his father to shelter the 11 children, pledging to help with their living expenses. Even though he was barely making ends meet himself, his father, who already had 6 people living in his one-room home, replied, it's no problem. And just like that, Julius and his family adopted 11 children. Running hero. Julius runs by the Lyra bus station where he discovered 11 children lying under a bus. Video profile. Julius in his own words. power of others. Throughout the years Julius was trotting the globe and winning medals, he never forgot about Uganda. He thought of the people back home with empty stomachs and no access to life-saving medicine, living in constant fear of the LRA. Julius was raised in a family that had always reached out to neighbors in need, and he felt blessed by all the support he had received from outside the family. "I feel I was so loved by others," says Julius, referring to the mentors and coaches who had provided him with places to stay, clothes to wear, and family away from home. So when Julius encountered those 11 orphaned children lying under the bus, he didn't think twice about coming to their rescue. His decision probably had something to do with the positive interactions he had experienced with people in his past. LO4 explained the meaning of social influence and recognized factors associated with persuasion. Rarely a day goes by that we do not come into contact with other human beings. The interactions we have with friends, family, and even strangers impact us in ways we may not realize. Psychologists refer to this as social influence, how a person is affected by others as evidenced in behaviors, emotions, and cognition. We begin our discussion with a powerful yet often unspoken form of social influence: expectations. Think back to your days in elementary school. What kind of student were you? An overachiever, a kid who struggled, or perhaps the class clown? The answer to this question may depend somewhat on the way your teachers perceived you. In a classic study, researchers administered a nonverbal intelligence test to students in a San Francisco elementary school, according to Rosenthal and Jacobs in 1966-1968. Then all the teachers were provided with a list of students who were likely to show surprising gains in intellectual competence. During the next year, Rosenthal, 2002a, page 841. But the list was fake. These kids were just a group selected at random, a good example of how deception is used in social psychology research. About 8 months later, the students were given a second intelligence test. The surprising gains: children showed greater test score increases than their classmates. Mind you, the only difference between these kids and the rest of the students was teacher expectations. The students who were expected to show superior improvement actually did. Why do you think this happened? Here we have a case in which teachers' expectations based on false information seemed to transform students' aptitudes and facilitate substantial gains. You might call this a self-fulfilling prophecy. The behavior expected actually came to pass because the expector expected it. Rosenthal, 2002a, page 847. What types of teachers' behaviors might explain this self-fulfilling prophecy? The teachers may have inadvertently communicated expectations by demonstrating warmer socio-emotional attitudes toward these surprising gains. Students provided them with more material and opportunities, or given them more complex and personalized feedback, according to Rosenthal, 2002a, 2002, and 2003. From the student's perspectives, teacher behaviors can create a desire to work hard, or they can result in a decline in interest and confidence, according to Casson et al. 2017. Expectations pay off. Expectations pay off. Liz Farias graduates from East Side College Preparatory School in East Palo Alto, California. Before the school was founded in 1996, high schoolers from East Palo Alto were bused to schools in other communities, and the majority dropped out before graduating. East Side raised the expectations for these teenagers, putting every single one of them on a college track. These high expectations, combined with the hard work of students, families, faculty, and staff, have produced impressive results. Over 99% of East Side's graduates have been accepted to four-year colleges and universities. East Side College Preparatory School, ND, paragraph 4. Since this classic study was conducted some 50 years ago, researchers have studied expectations in a variety of classroom settings. The results demonstrate that teacher expectations can have an important impact on many parts of students' lives. When teachers have confidence in their students' abilities, even if they are overconfident, the students perform better in school and have greater expectations for themselves. Aspirations to go to college, for example, being underestimated seems to have the opposite effect, impeding students' development. Bergold and Steinmeier, 2023. Children of color, particularly females, seem to be disproportionately affected by low teacher expectations, as one study found. being underestimated seems to have the opposite effect, impeding students' development. According to Bergold and Steinmeier 2023, children of color, particularly females, seem to be disproportionately affected by low teacher expectations. As one study found, teachers may predict greater math ability in students who are white as opposed to black, or Hispanic and male as opposed to female. This is especially important given that students' perceptions of their academic ability are developed based on messages they receive from their social environment, especially those of their teachers and parents. According to Koper Genturk, ETAL 2020, page 37, expectations are powerful, but they are just one form of social influence. Let's return to the story of Julius and learn about more deliberate types of influence. Persuasion. When Julius asked his father to shelter and feed the 11 children, he was using a form of social influence called persuasion. With persuasion, one intentionally tries to make other people change their attitudes and beliefs, which may or may not lead to changes in their behaviors. The person doing the persuading does not necessarily have control over those they seek to persuade. Julius could not force his father to feel sympathy for the children. Source: Message Audience. According to U.S. psychologist Carl Hovland, 1912 to 1961, persuasive power is determined by three factors: the source, the message, and the audience. According to Hovland, ETAL 1953. The source: people are more likely to be persuaded if the individual or organization sending the message is credible, and credibility may depend on perceived expertise and trustworthiness. According to Hovland and Weiss, 1951, the familiarity and closeness of the source can also play a role when it comes to persuading people to get behind a cause. On social media, friends and relatives seem to have more clout than organizations. According to Nekmet, ETAL 2019, the message: persuasion is more likely if the delivery of the message is logical and to the point. According to Chaikin and Eagley, 1976, fear-inducing information can increase persuasion, though it might backfire under certain circumstances. According to Mekskowski, ETAL 2016, imagine someone using this message to encourage teeth flossing. If you don't floss daily, you can end up with infected gums, and that infection can spread to your eyes and create total blindness. If the audience is overly frightened by a message, imagine small children being told to floss, or else the tension they feel may actually interfere with their ability to process the message. According to Janis and Feschbach, 1953. The audience. Many characteristics of the audience are important among them. Many characteristics of the audience are important among them. Age. Middle age adults 40 to 60 years old are unlikely to be persuaded, whereas children are relatively susceptible. Roberts and Del Vecchio, 2000. Another factor is emotional state. When people are happy and eating tasty food, interestingly enough, they are more likely to be persuaded. According to Ronson, 2018, Janis, ETAL 1965. Mental focus is also key. If your mind is elsewhere, you are less likely to be affected by message content. According to Petty and Kekiopo, 1986. Credibility counts. The American Psychological Association, APA, and the Association for Psychological Science, APS, are highly regarded sources of information in the field of psychology. Credible sources are more likely to persuade people to change attitudes and beliefs. Elaboration likelihood model. The elaboration likelihood model proposes that the way people process information can impact how persuaded they are. Those who think critically and focus on the content of a message process information using the central route. Meanwhile, those who pay more attention to simple issue irrelevant cues, such as the credibility or attractiveness of the source, process information using the peripheral route. According to L. Headley and Zurich, 2023, Lee, ETAL 2017, page 1076, and Petty and Kekiopo, 1986. Think about a stereotypical beer commercial. Good-looking people are laughing and having fun with beers in hand. The ad has little to do with the quality of the beer, but many people are still persuaded to buy it. Advertisers or anyone trying to be persuasive will be more effective if they tailor their strategy to the processing route of their target audience. Does the audience use the central route to processing? If so, the message should be detailed and complex. If the audience uses the peripheral route, it's best to keep things brief and simple, as in the beer commercial According to Glassman, ETAL 2018, page 1416. Following the 2018 mass shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, where 17 students and staff members lost their lives, the United States has experienced an upsurge in calls for gun control and research on firearm-related deaths. According to Ocasio, ETAL 2021, Rubenstein, ETAL 2019, a person with strong feelings about gun control, either for or against it, might take advantage of central processing when trying to develop a persuasive argument. Consider the statement written by pediatric trauma surgeons who care for children wounded by firearms. Having a firearm in the home is associated with an increased risk of injury and death. For every self-protection homicide, there were 1.3 unintentional firearm deaths, 4.6 criminal homicides, and 37 gun suicides, according to Petty, ETAL 2019, page 10. This message, which explains the numerical relationship between different types of firearm deaths, would be more persuasive to a person using the central processing route. Someone unfamiliar with or indifferent to gun control policy might be using the peripheral route and therefore focus on the credibility of the source, appearance of the speaker, and so on. The take-home message is this: if you want to persuade as many people as possible, make sure you take advantage of both routes. Compliance. LO5 defined compliance and explained some of the techniques used to gain it. The results of persuasion are internal and related to a change in attitude, according to Key, ETAL 2009. These attitude shifts may or may not lead to changes in behavior. Compliance, on the other hand, occurs when people voluntarily change their behavior at the request or direction of another person or group who generally has no true authority over them. Compliance is evident in changes to overt behavior. Key, ETAL 2009, Table 12.1. For example, someone might send an email asking you to fill out a questionnaire. You are not obligated to respond, but perhaps you will comply. Did you know that requests sent by email are less likely to achieve compliance than those made in person? Even so, people tend to place an undue amount of confidence in email requests. Organizat and Bones 2017. Surprisingly, compliance often occurs outside of our awareness. Suppose you are waiting in line at a copy machine and a man asks if he can cut in front of you. Do you allow it? Your response may depend on the wording of the request. Researchers studying this very scenario, a person asking for permission to cut in line, have found that compliance is much more likely when the request is accompanied by a reason saying, "Excuse me, I have 5 pages. May I use the copy machine?" Will not work as well as "Excuse me, I have 5 pages. May I use the copy machine because I am in a rush?" People are more likely to comply with a request that includes a "because" phrase, even if the reasoning is not logical. For example, "because I am in a rush" achieves about the same compliance as "because I have to make copies," according to Langer, ETAL 1978, page 637. One way to achieve compliance is the foot in the door technique, which occurs when someone makes a small request followed by a larger request, according to Friedman and Fraser, 1966. If a college club is trying to enlist students to help with a service project, such as raising money for children who are starving in Yemen, its members might start by asking students to share information about Yemen's humanitarian crisis with friends on social media. If a student responds positively to this request, the club members might make a bigger request, asking for a donation with the expectation that the student will comply with the second request on the grounds of having said yes to the first. Why would this technique work? The reasoning is that if you have already said yes to a small request, you will likely agree to a bigger request in order to remain consistent in your involvement. Your prior participation leads you to believe you are the type of person who gets involved. In other words, your attitude has shifted. Chialdini and Goldstein 2004, Friedman and Fraser 1966, L. Wang, ETAL 2022. So why is such a strategy called foot in the door? In the past, salespeople went door to door trying to sell their goods and services, and they often achieved success if they could physically get a foot in the door, thereby keeping it open and continuing their sales pitch. This method may not work as well as it did in the past, as well as people are now inundated with advertising ploys, according to Gamian, Wilk, and Dolinsky 2020. Another method for gaining compliance is the door in the face technique, which involves making a large, sometimes unreasonable request followed by a smaller request. With this technique, the expectation is that the person will not go along with the large request, but will comply with the smaller request. Because it may seem minor in comparison, there are numerous reasons people comply under these circumstances, but the main reason seems to be one of reciprocal concessions. If the solicitor, the person trying to obtain something, is willing to give up something, the large request, the person being solicited tends to feel that they too should give in and satisfy the smaller request, according to Cialdini and Goldstein 2004. Table 12.1 Methods of Compliance. Compliance technique. What is it? Why it works. Example, foot in the door technique, making a small request followed by a larger request. If you have already said yes to a small request, changes are you will agree to a bigger request to remain consistent in your involvement. A child asks a parent for $5 and then $20. Door in the face technique, making a large, sometimes unreasonable request followed by a smaller request. If the solicitor is unwilling to give up the large request, the person being solicited tends to give in and satisfy the smaller request. We call this reciprocal concessions. A child asks a parent for $100 and then $5. Here are two effective approaches for getting people to comply with your requests. Let's review these concepts using Julius as an example. After meeting the 11 orphaned children, Julius brought the children home and asked his parents to feed them. Once his parents complied with this initial request, Julius made a much larger request. He asked them to shelter the children indefinitely. This is an example of the foot in the door technique because Julius first made a modest request, will you feed these children? And then followed up with a larger one, will you shelter these children? Had these requests been flip-flopped, that is, had Julius only wanted to get the children a meal but first asked his parents to house them, we would call it the door in the face technique. Had these requests been flip-flopped, that is, had Julius only wanted the children to get a meal but first asked his parents to house them, we would call it the door in the face technique. Compliance generally occurs in response to specific requests or instructions. Will you lend me $5? Can you chop these onions? Please hold the door. But social influence needn't be explicit. Sometimes we change our behaviors and beliefs without anyone asking us to do so. We simply want to blend in with the crowd. Conformity. When Julius came to the United States on a college scholarship in 1995, he was struck by something of the cultural differences he observed between the United States and Uganda. The casual and revealing style of dress, for example, during the decade Julius lived in the United States. He never stopped acting like a Ugandan. Before going out in the evening, he would tuck in his shirt, comb his hair, and make sure his clothes were ironed. You might say Julius refused to conform to certain aspects of U.S. culture. Resisting conformity is not always easy to do. Courageous nonconformist. In 2014, 17-year-old Malala Yousafzai became the youngest recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize. Yousafzai began her activism at age 11, blogging for the BBC about life under the Taliban in her native Pakistan. Over the next few years, she became an outspoken advocate for girls' education, but her nonconformist stance was not welcomed by all. When Yousafzai was 15 years old, a Taliban gunman entered her school bus and shot her in the head. She recovered from her injuries and has continued to advocate for the rights of women around the world, according to Chotiner 2019 and NobelPrize.org 2014. LO6 identify the factors that influence the likelihood of someone conforming. Why conform? Imagine a group of people standing outside. One person looks up at the sky. What do the others do when they notice they look up too? We seem to have a commanding urge to do what others are doing, even if it means changing our normal behavior. This tendency to modify our behaviors, attitudes, beliefs, and opinions to match those of others is known as conformity. Sometimes we conform to the norms or standards of the social environment, which consists of family, friends, coworkers, or anyone in our social circle. Unlike compliance, which occurs in response to an explicit and direct request, conformity is generally unspoken. We often conform because we feel compelled to fit in and belong. Connections. In the Motivation and Emotion chapter, we describe Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which includes the need to belong. When physiological and safety needs are being met, we may be motivated by the need for love and belongingness, and this can drive us to conform. It is important to note that conformity is not always a bad thing. In many situations, we rely on conformity to ensure the smooth running of day-to-day activities. What would it be like to ride on a bus or subway if nobody conformed to common social rules? Try this. Next time you are outside in a crowded area, look up and keep your eyes toward the sky. Do some people change their gazes to match yours, even though there is no other indication that something is happening above? Conformity clouds judgment. Conformity clouds judgment. In a classic experiment by psychologist Solomon Asch from 1907 through 1996, college student participants were grouped with Confederates working for the researchers. Each participant sat at a table with a small group of Confederates, according to Asch, 1955. Everyone at the table was told to look at two cards. The first was marked with one vertical line, the standard line, and the second with three vertical lines of different lengths, marked 1, 2, and 3, figure 12.2. The group was then instructed to announce, one at a time going around the table, which of the three lines was closest in length to the standard line. The first two rounds went smoothly with everybody in agreement about which of the three lines matched the standard. But then in the third round, the first 5 people, all Confederates, offered what was clearly the wrong answer, one after the other, per the researchers' instructions. Extended description for figure 12.2, Asch's conformity experiment. The illustration shows two boxes. On top. The box on the left, labeled standard line, has one thick vertical line. The box on the right, labeled comparison lines, has 3 thick parallel vertical lines labeled 1, 2, and 3. Line 2 is the tallest of the 3 lines. Line 3 is taller than line 1. The black and white photo at the bottom shows 3 men sitting at a table with numbers 5, 6, and 7 set before them. Figure 12.2, Asch's conformity experiment. Participants in this experiment were asked to look at the lines on 2 cards and indicate which of the comparison lines was closest in length to the standard line. Imagine you are a participant like the man wearing glasses in this photo, and everyone else at the table chooses line 3. Would that influence your answer? If you are like many participants, it would. 76% conformed to the incorrect answer at least once. Would the real participant, the 6th person to answer, follow suit and conform to the wrong answer? Or would he stand his ground and report the correct answer? In roughly 37% of the trials, participants went along with the group and provided the incorrect answer. What's more, 76% of the participants conformed and gave the wrong answer at least once, according to Asch, 1955 and 1956. When members of the control group made the same judgments alone in a room, they were correct 99% of the time, confirming that the differences between the standard line and the comparison lines were substantial and generally not difficult to assess. It is important to note that most participants, 95%, refused to conform on at least one occasion, choosing an answer that conflicted with that of the group, according to Asch, 1956, and Griggs, 2015b. Thus, they were capable of thinking and behaving independently. This type of study was later replicated in a variety of cultures with mostly similar results, according to Bond and Smith, 1996, a significant achievement given that some research published in psychology journals has been difficult to replicate, according to Camera ETAL 2018, and Open Science Collaboration 2015, as well as SHMAC 2020. Research connections. In Chapter 1, we explain that a control group in an experiment is not exposed to the independent variable or treatment. In this case, the control group is not exposed to Confederates giving incorrect answers. Following the crowd, why did some participants in Ash's study go along with the group and provide incorrect answers? There are three major reasons for conformity. The first is normative social influence. Most of us want the approval of others, and this desire for acceptance may influence our behavior. If you are looking for an example of normative social influence, just think back to middle school. Perhaps you remember feeling pressured to be like some of your classmates. A second reason for conformity is informational social influence. We follow others in order to be correct. Perhaps you have a friend who is very knowledgeable about politics or medicine. When it comes to these topics, you tend to defer to their expertise, look to them for confirmation, and follow their lead. Third, we may conform to others because they belong to a certain reference group we respect, admire, or long to join. Conformity is also influenced by situational circumstances. Figure 12.3. When do we conform? Listed here are some conditions that increase the likelihood of conforming according to Aronson 2012 and Ash 1955, and others that decrease the odds of conforming according to Ash 1955, Bond, and Smith 1996. Increased likelihood. The group includes at least 3 other people who are unanimous. You have to report your decision in front of others and give your reasons. You are faced with a task you think is difficult. You are unsure of your ability to perform a task. Decreased likelihood. At least one other person is going against the group with you. Group members come from individualist or me-centered cultures as opposed to collectivistic or community-centered cultures. We have now explored 3 forms of social influence: persuasion, compliance, and conformity, but there is one yet to cover, Table 12.2. Let's take a trip to the darker side and examine the frightening phenomenon of obedience. Boy soldiers. Between the late 1980s and 2006, over 24,000 Ugandan children were taken by the Lord's Resistance Army, LRA, Allen ETAL 2020, according to LRA, Allen ETAL 2020. While a captive of the LRA, Julius witnessed other boy soldiers assaulting innocent people. While a captive of the LRA, Julius witnessed other boy soldiers assaulting innocent people and stealing property. Sometimes at the end of the day, they would laugh or brag about how many people they had beaten or killed. But these were normal boys from the villages, children who never would have behaved this way under regular circumstances. Julius remembers seeing other child soldiers cry alone at night after returning to the camp and reflecting on what they had done. Child exploitation. These boys were captured by the Lord's Resistance Army, LRA, in 2003, but later rescued. They are among the tens of thousands of children who have been exploited by military groups in Uganda. Julius was just 12 years old when he was abducted by the LRA and forced to fight and plunder on the group's behalf. What drives an ordinary child to commit senseless violence? A psychologist might tell you it has something to do with obedience. Obedience, L07, describe obedience and explain how Stanley Milgram studied it. Obedience occurs when we change our behavior or act in a way we might not normally act, because we have been ordered to do so by an authority figure. In these situations, an imbalance of power exists, and the person with more power, for example, a teacher, police officer, doctor, or boss, generally has an advantage over someone with less power, who is likely to be obedient out of respect, fear, or concern. In some cases, the person in charge demands obedience for the well-being of those less powerful, a parent demanding obedience from a child running wildly through a crowded store. Other times, the person wielding power demands obedience for their own benefit, an adult who perpetrates sexual abuses against children. Table 12.2, Concepts of Social Influence, Concept, Definition, Example. Persuasion, persuasion. Definition, intentionally trying to make people change their attitudes and beliefs, which may or may not lead to changes in behavior. Example, trust our product because it contains the purest ingredients. Concept, compliance. Definition, voluntarily changing behavior at the request or direction of another person or group who in general does not have any authority over you. Example, remove your shoes before you walk into the house because you have been asked to do so. Concept, conformity. Definition, the tendency to modify behaviors, attitudes, beliefs, and opinions to match those of others. Example, remove your shoes before you walk into the house because everyone else does. Concept, obedience. Definition, changing your behavior because you have been ordered to do so by an authority figure. Example, follow the detour sign. Whether or not you realize that other people constantly shape your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, here are some important types of social influence. This will shock you. Milgram's study. In the 1960s, psychologist Stanley Milgram, 1933 through 1984, investigated the extent to which obedience can lead to behaviors that most people would consider unethical. His initial motivation for studying obedience came from learning about the horrific events of World War II and the Holocaust, which could only have been carried out on a massive scale if a very large number of people obeyed orders, according to Milgram, 1974, page 1, to find how far ordinary people would go in obeying authority figures, particularly when it came to punishing others. Milgram, 1963-1974. According to Milgram, 1963-1974, to find how far ordinary people would go in obeying authority figures, particularly when it came to punishing others. According to Milgram, 1963 and 1974, conducted a series of experiments. Overall, he included 780 participants. Only 40 of them were women, according to Martin, 2016. These samples included teachers, salespeople, post office workers, engineers, and laborers, representing a wide range of educational backgrounds, from elementary school dropouts to people with graduate degrees. Milgram conducted 24 variations of his experimental method over the course of 1 year, starting in the summer of 1961, according to Martin, 2016. Described here is a basic outline of the method he used. Upon arriving at Milgram's Yale University laboratory, participants were informed that they would be using punishment as part of a learning experiment, another example of research deception. Then they were asked to draw a slip of paper from a hat. All these slips read teacher, but the participants were led to believe that these slips read either teacher or learner. Thus, every study participant ended up playing the role of teacher, while Confederates enlisted by the researchers played that of learner. To start, the teacher was asked to sit in the learner's chair so they could experience a 45-volt shock, just to know what the learner might be feeling. Next, the teacher was instructed to sit at a control panel and led to believe it would be delivering shocks. The panel went from 15 volts to 450 volts, labeled from slight shock to XXX, infographic 12.2. The goal, the teacher was told, was for the learner to memorize a set of paired words. Each time the learner made a mistake, the teacher was to administer a shock, and the shock would increase by 15 volts for every mistake. The learner was located in a separate room, arms strapped to a table and electrodes attached to his wrists, apparently receiving shocks. In reality, the learner, a Confederate, did not receive any shocks, but instead followed a script of responses. The learner's behaviors, including the mistakes he made with the word pairs and his reactions to the increasing shock levels, mild complaints, screaming references to his heart condition, pleas for the experiment to stop, and total silence as if he were unconscious or even dead, were identical for all participants. A researcher in a white lab coat, also a Confederate with scripted responses, always remained in the room with the teacher, insisting the experiment proceed if the teacher questioned going any further. Meanwhile, the learner continued with appeals such as, "Experimenter, get me out of here. I refuse to go on, or I can't stand the pain, according to Milgram 1965, page 62. The researcher would say to the teacher, please continue, and you have no other choice, you must go on. The researcher would say to the teacher, please continue, and you have no other choice, you must go on, according to Milgram 1963, page 374. Infographic 12.2, Milgram's Shocking Obedience Study. Introductory text reads, Stanley Milgram's study on obedience and authority was one of the most groundbreaking and surprising experiments in all of social psychology. Milgram wanted to test the extent to which we will follow the orders of an authority figure. Would we follow orders to hurt someone else, even when that person was begging us to stop? Milgram's experiment also raises ethical issues about deception and informed consent. Participants had to actually think they were shocking another. Participants had to actually think they were shocking another person for the experiment to work. Creating this deception involved the use of Confederates, people secretly working for the researchers, whose behaviors and spoken responses were carefully scripted. Milgram found high levels of obedience in his participants, much higher than he and others had predicted at the beginning of the study. An illustration shows an experimenter Confederate writing on a notepad, a teacher participant wired to shock. An illustration shows an experimenter Confederate writing on a notepad, a teacher participant wired to a shock generator, and a learner Confederate controlling the shock generator from another room. 2 callouts from the experimenter read, please continue, and the experiment requires that you go on. Text beside the illustration reads, the teacher who operated the shock generator in Milgram's experiment was the only actual participant. The experiment involved 2 Confederates, a learner who pretended to suffer shock administered by the participant, and an experimenter who prompted the participant to continue, according to Milgram 1965. Another illustration below shows a series of 30 small red lights numbered from 1 to 30. A scale corresponding to the lights ranges from 15 volts to 450 volts in increments of 60 volts. There are 30 switches below the scale, in which switch 10 is on and the corresponding red light numbered 10 glows. 15 volts is labeled slight shock, 75 volts is labeled moderate shock, 135 volts is labeled strong shock, 195 volts is labeled very strong shock, 255 volts is labeled intense shock, 315 volts is labeled extreme intensity shock, and 375 volts is labeled danger, severe shock. Text pointing to the red light numbered 10 reads, experimenter, get me out of here. I refuse to go on. Text pointing to the red light numbered 12 reads, I can't stand the pain. Text pointing to the red light numbered 14 reads, grunt, I've had enough. Text pointing to the red light numbered 20 reads, scream, I absolutely refuse to answer anymore. Get me out of here. A call out below the illustration reads, on the control panel of Milgram's shock generator, the participant would see 30 switches clearly labeled as delivering a range from slight shock, 15 volts, to danger, severe shock, 375 volts and beyond. The learner produced scripted responses at every level, according to Milgram 1963. A line graph below the illustration plots the percent of participants still obedient on the vertical axis against the shock level in volts on the horizontal axis. A line graph below the illustration plots the percent of participants still obedient on the vertical axis against shock level in volts on the horizontal axis. The horizontal axis ranges from 15 to 40 in increments of 60, and the vertical axis ranges from 0 to 100 in increments of 20. The approximate data from the graph is as follows. The curve labeled actual behavior passes through the points 15, 100, 130, 100, 135, 90, 150, 85, 180, 80, 270, 80, 285, 75, 300, 67, 315, 67, 340, 63, 450, 63. Text pointing to the curve after 340 and 63 reads more than 60%. The curve labeled predicted behavior passes through the points 15, 100, 60, 93, 75, 82, 90, 78, 135, 54, 150, 34, 165, 30, 180, 18, 195, 16, 210, 16, 285, 4, 0, 450. A call out beside the graph reads, before the experiment, Milgram and a panel of experts predicted most participants would not proceed beyond 150 volts when the learner explicitly demands to end the experiment. In fact, actual results show that many participants obeyed the experimenter's commands all the way to the highest shock level, according to Milgram 1965. How many participants do you think obeyed the researcher and proceeded with the experiment in spite of the learner's desperate pleas? Although some participants refused to go on, according to Apple 2019, an astounding 60 to 65% of participants continued to the highest voltage level, according to Martin 2016. Most of them showed obvious signs of discomfort, stuttering, sweating, trembling, yet they still obeyed the researcher. One person who witnessed the study reported the following: I observed a mature and initially poised businessman enter the laboratory smiling and confident. Within 20 minutes, he was reduced to a twitching, stuttering wreck who was rapidly approaching a point of nervous collapse, according to Milgram 1963, page 377. Even participants who eventually refused to proceed went much further than Milgram or anyone else had predicted. They all used shocks up to at least 300 volts or intense shock, according to Milgram 1963 and 1964 infographic 12.2. Why do people join cults? Members of People's Temple cult posed for a photo in 1975. 3 years later, some 909 cult members participated in a collective suicide and murder under the direction of Reverend Jim Jones. What made these people obey their leader to the point of death? Jones used some of the same mind control tactics outlined in George Orwell's classic novel 1984, including constant surveillance, food restriction, control of sexual behaviors, and creating illusions of intense emotional bonds with followers. Members of the cult truly believed that Jones, whom they called Dad, cared for them, according to Zimbardo 2020. Replicating Milgram. This type of research has been replicated in the United States and other countries, and the findings have remained fairly consistent, with 61 through 90% of participants continuing to the highest level of shock, according to Aronson 2018 and Blast 1999, and Delinsky ETAL 2017. Not surprisingly, criticisms of Milgram's studies have been strong, according to Martin 2016 and Perry ETAL 2020. Many were concerned that the research went too far with its deception. It would certainly not receive approval from an institutional review board today, and some wondered if the participants were harmed by knowing that they theoretically could have been killed. Many were concerned that the research went too far with its deception. It would certainly not receive approval from an institutional review board today, and some wondered if the participants were harmed by knowing that they theoretically could have been killed. And some wondered if the participants were harmed by knowing that they theoretically could have killed someone with their choices during the study. Milgram 1964 spent time with participants following the study and reported that 84% claimed to be glad they had participated, while only 1.3% were sorry. The participants underwent psychiatric evaluations a year later, and none of them were said to show signs of having been harmed by his experiences. Milgram, 1964, page 850. Criticisms of Milgram's research have continued, with some questioning his representation of the seriously inadequate debriefing process, extended prodding of participants to continue the experiment, and selective non-reporting of several of his 23 studies, according to Griggs and Whitehead, 2015, page 315, and Griggs et al. 2020. Others offer evidence that some participants were aware of the deception, that is, they knew the shocks were fake and thus did not have a problem following orders, according to Perry et al. 2020. Connections. In Chapter 1, we reported that professional organizations have specific guidelines to ensure ethical treatment of research participants. They include doing no harm, safeguarding welfare, and respecting the dignity of living things. An institutional review board also ensures the well-being of participants. Milgram and others followed up on the original study to determine if there are specific factors that increase the likelihood of obedience in such a scenario, according to Blast 1991 and Berger 2019, as well as Martin 2016 and Milgram 1965. All of the following appear to be important. 1. The legitimacy of the authority figure. More legitimate figures can't. 1. The legitimacy of the authority figure. More legitimate figures gain higher levels of obedience. 2. The physical distance between the authority figure and participant. The shorter the distance, the more obedience. 3. The physical distance between the learner and participant. The greater the distance, the more obedience. And 4. The presence of other teachers. If another Confederate acts as an obedient teacher. 4. The presence of other teachers. If another Confederate acts as an obedient teacher, the participant is more likely to obey as well. Milgram's findings are disheartening, but one ray of hope shines through in his later experiments. When participants saw others refuse to obey, they sometimes followed suit. In a follow-up experiment, 2 additional Confederates played the role of teacher. If these Confederates showed signs of refusing to obey the authority figure, the participant was far less likely to cooperate. In fact, only 10% of participants were willing to carry on with the learning experiment, according to Milgram 1974. This suggests that one person can make a difference. When someone stands up for what is right, others will follow that lead. Show what you know. Question number 1. Match each definition with the corresponding term below. Is the answer A, how a person is affected by others? Question number 1. Match each definition with the corresponding term below. A, how a person is affected by others. B, intentionally trying to make people change their attitudes. C, voluntarily changing behavior at the request of someone without authority. D, making a small request followed by a larger request. E, the tendency to modify behaviors, attitudes, and beliefs to match those of others. Conformity, persuasion, social influence, compliance, foot in the door technique. The answer is A, social influence. B, persuasion. C, compliance. D, foot in the door technique. And E, conformity. Question number 2. Obedience occurs when we change our behavior or act in a way we might not normally act because we have been ordered to do so by an authority figure. Question number 3. Describe a situation in which someone successfully resisted the urge to conform. Answers will vary. Examples may include resisting the urge to eat Answers will vary. Examples may include resisting the urge to eat dessert when others at the table are doing so, saying no to a cigarette when others offer one, and so forth. Groups and aggression. Thus far, the primary focus of this chapter has been on individuals and social situations. We learned, for example, how people process information about others, social cognition, and how behavior is shaped by interactions with others, social influence. But human beings do not always function as independent units. We often come together in groups which have their own fascinating dynamics. Better together. The most important competition of Julius Achon's career was probably the 1994 World Junior Championships in Portugal. Julius was 17 at the time and representing Uganda. It was his first experience traveling in an airplane wearing running shoes and racing on a rubber track. No one expected an unknown boy from Uganda to win, but Julius surprised everyone, including himself, crossing the finish line strides ahead of the others. He almost looked uncertain as he raised his arms in celebration. Julius ran the 1500 meters, the equivalent of 0.93 miles, in approximately 3 minutes and 40 seconds. Do you suppose he would have run this fast if he had been alone? Research suggests the answer is no. According to Worringham and Messick 1983, in some situations, people perform better when others are observing, according to Steinmetz ETAL 2016. This is particularly true when the task at hand is uncomplicated, running, and the individual is well prepared. Runners may spend months training for races. Through social facilitation, personal performance may improve when the activity is fairly straightforward and the person is adequately prepped. The presence of others does not always lead to higher achievement. However, according to Aiello and Dutit, 2001, when people are watching, one may spend precious cognitive resources trying to pay attention to them, which can actually lead to decreases in performance, according to Bellatier, ETAL 2019. Faster together, these athletes may race faster with the help of social facilitation. When a task requires high energy expenditure, but not a lot of cognitive activity, the presence of others may help boost performance, according to Van Moors, ETAL 2022. When two heads are not better than one, have you ever noticed that people on teams sometimes slack off and let others do all the work? When individual contributions to the group aren't easy to ascertain, social loafing may occur. Latane, ETAL 1979. Social loafing is the tendency for people to put forth less than their best effort when individual contributions are too complicated to measure. It often goes hand in hand with diffusion of responsibility, or the sharing of responsibilities. Among all group members, diffusion of responsibility can lead to feelings of decreased accountability and motivation. If we suspect other group members are slacking, we tend to follow suit in order to keep things equal. Cut the loafing. Want some advice on how to reduce social loafing in your work groups? Even if an instructor doesn't require it, try to get other students in your group to designate and take responsibility for specific tasks. Have team members specify their contributions to the end product. Submit their part of the work to the group before the assignment is due, and participate in a group presentation, according to Jones 2013, Maiden and Perry 2011, and Voiles, ETAL 2015. If possible, use video conferencing technology such as Google Meet or Zoom to work together, as this type of collaboration may encourage group members to do their part. Keep in mind that social loafing is less likely to occur when the assignment is challenging and group members feel they have something special to contribute, according to Sims and Nichols, 2014. If you do have some free riders in your group, don't automatically assume they are lazy or apathetic. The problem could be communication. Some people have a hard time articulating their ideas, according to Gabelica, ETAL 2021. Communicate with these individuals early in the process and work with your group to identify a task that each person can perform with confidence and success. De-individualization. Social loafing may be annoying and problematic, but other group dynamics can be more dangerous. In the previous section, we discussed how obedience played a role in the senseless violence carried out by boy soldiers in Uganda. We suspect that the actions of these children also had something to do with de-individualization. People in groups sometimes feel a diminished sense of personal responsibility, inhibition, or adherence to social norms. This state of de-individualization can occur when group members are not treated as individuals and thus begin to exhibit a lack of self-awareness, according to Diener, 1979. As members of a group, the boy soldiers may have felt a loss of identity, social responsibility, and ability to discriminate right from wrong. Research suggests that children are indeed vulnerable to de-individualization. In a classic study of trick-or-treaters, U.S. psychologist Ed Diener, 1946 through 2021, and his colleagues, Diener et al., 1976, set up an experiment in 27 homes throughout Seattle, Washington. Children arriving at these houses to trick or treat were ushered in by a woman, a Confederate of course. She told them they could take one piece of candy from a bowl on the table. Next to the bowl of candy was a second bowl filled with pennies and nickels. The woman then excused herself, saying she had to get back to work in another room. Unknown to the children, an experimenter was observing their behavior through a peephole, tallying up the amount of candy and or money they took. The other variable being recorded was the number of children. and adults in the hallway. The experimenters never knew how many people would show up when the doorbell rang. Connections. In Chapter 1, we discussed a type of descriptive research that involves studying participants in their natural environments. Naturalistic observation requires that researchers do not disturb the participants or their surroundings. Would Diener's study be considered naturalistic observation? The findings were fascinating. If a parent was present, the children were well behaved. Only 8% took more than one piece of candy, but with no adult present, events unfolded quite differently. 21% of children took more than the allotted amount when they came through the door, alone and anonymously. The Confederate did not ask for names or other identifying information. Perhaps more shocking, 80% of the children took extra candy and or money when they were in a group and anonymous. The condition of being in a group combined with anonymity created a sense of de-individualization, according to Diener et al., 1976. Connections. What motivated the children who were alone? In the Motivation and Emotion chapter, we discuss various sources of motivation ranging from instincts to the need for power. These sources of motivation might help explain why some children took more than their fair share of candy when they thought no one was watching. We have shown how de-individualization occurs in groups of children, but what about adults? This type of behavior has been observed in various settings and with many groups of people. Fans of soccer, football, and other sports have been known to storm playing fields and vandalize property, showing virtually no regard for the safety of others. Internet trolls bully people and spread inflammatory content on social media, according to Monakov, 2020. Would people act this way if they weren't part of a crowd? We suspect their behaviors have something to do with de-individualization. More people, more problems. When people associate with like-minded individuals, think Republicans and Democrats, they tend to reinforce each other's positions. Group polarization is the tendency for group members to take a more extreme stance after deliberations and discussion, according to Myers and Lamb, 1976. Suppose you convene several individuals who strongly support universal health care. As they hear others echo their opinions and offer supporting evidence, their original beliefs and positions are reinforced, and the conversation becomes more one-sided. So is group deliberation actually useful? Perhaps not when the members are initially in agreement. As a group becomes increasingly united, another process known as groupthink can occur. This is the tendency for group members to maintain cohesiveness and agreement in their decision-making and fail to consider alternatives and related viewpoints. According to Janice 1972, Rose 2011, during the COVID-19 pandemic, groups of people spread misinformation, like for example saying COVID is a lie, and acted in non-productive ways, according to Forsyth 2020, page 140. Groupthink may have prevented protesters from asking logical questions like, is it a good idea to block the entrance to a trauma center? Groupthink may have prevented protesters from asking logical questions like, is it a good idea to block the entrance to a trauma treatment center during a pandemic? Page 141. Instructors can help guard against groupthink in the classroom by assigning students to explore a variety of perspectives surrounding a contentious argument about abortion or the death penalty, for example, according to C.C. Ann Williams, 2018. Groupthink is thought to have played a role in a variety of disasters, including the sinking of the Titanic in 1912, the explosion of the Challenger space shuttle in 1986, the Mount Everest climbing tragedy. Groupthink is thought to have played a role in a variety of disasters, including the sinking of the Titanic in 1912, the explosion of the Challenger space shuttle in 1986, the Mount Everest climbing tragedy in 1996, and the U.S. decision to invade Iraq in 2003. According to Batty, 2010, and Burnett, ETAL, 2011. And so it seems groupthink can have life or death consequences. The same could be said of the bystander effect, another alarming phenomenon that occurs among people in groups. The bystander who refused to stand by. Before meeting Julius in 2003, the 11 orphaned children spent their days begging for money. Usually they ate scraps of food that hotels had poured onto side roads for dogs and cats. At night, they kept each other warm, coiled beneath the bus, and they shared food when there was enough to go around. The older children looked after the little ones, making sure they had something to eat. Day after day, the children encountered hundreds of passersby. But of all those people, only 3 or 4 would typically offer food or money, nothing more, until a thin, muscular man in his mid-20s appeared wearing the most unusual outfit. Dressed in a sleeveless top, a runner's singlet, short shorts, and fancy sneakers, Julius Achon looked different from any person the children had seen before, according to S. Magisha, Personal Communication, March 9, 2012. And he was, of course, different. This man would ultimately ensure they had everything they needed for a chance at a better life: food, clothing, a place to sleep, an education, and a family. LO8 to recognize factors that influence the bystander effect. The bystander effect. Before meeting Julius, the children had been living on the streets for several months. Why didn't anyone try to rescue them? Everybody was fearing responsibility. Julius says, in northern Uganda, many people cannot even afford to feed themselves, so they are reluctant to lend a helping hand. But perhaps there was another factor at work, one that psychologists call the bystander effect. When a person is in trouble, bystanders have the tendency to assume and perhaps wish that someone else will help, and therefore stand by and do nothing. This is partly a result of the diffusion of responsibility. The bystander effect often occurs when many people are present. Strange as it seems, we are more likely to aid a person in distress if no one else is around, according to Darley and Latane, 1968. Eagley and Crowley, 1986, Latane and Darley, 1968. So when people encountered the children begging on the street, they probably assumed someone else would take care of the problem. These children must belong to someone. Their parents will come back for them. Perhaps the most famous illustration of the bystander effect is the Kitty Genovese case. It was March 13th, 1964, around 3:15 a.m., when Catherine Kitty Genovese arrived home from work in her Queens, New York neighborhood. As she approached her apartment building, an attacker brutally stabbed her. Kitty screamed for help, but initial reports suggested that no one came to her rescue. The attacker ran away, and Kitty stumbled to her apartment building, but he soon returned, raping and stabbing her to death. The New York Times originally reported that 38 neighbors heard her cries for help, witnessed the attack, and did nothing to assist. But the evidence suggests there were far fewer eyewitnesses, perhaps only a half dozen, and that several people did respond by screaming out their windows, with at least one person calling the police. What's more, the second attack occurred inside her building, where few people could have witnessed it, according to Griggs 2015C, Manning ETAL 2007. The attacker was arrested 5 days later when, ironically, two bystanders intervened after witnessing him commit a burglary, according to Casson 2017B. A classic but imperfect example, the murder of Kitty Genovese is frequently used to explain the bystander effect, but it is not a perfect illustration. An early news report suggested that 38 people witnessed the attack and did nothing to help, but there were actually far fewer bystanders, and some of them tried to intervene, according to Ferguson ETAL 2018, Manning ETAL 2007. In April 2010, a man also in Queens was left to die after several people walked by him and decided to do nothing. The man, Hugo Tail-Yax, had been trying to help a woman under assault, but the attacker stabbed him in the chest, according to Livingston ETAL 2010. As many as 25 people walked past Mr. Tail-Yax as he lay on the ground, dying, and one even took a cell phone picture of him before walking away. And the bystander effect also helps. The bystander effect also happens online. In one survey study, only a third of students reported that they came to the aid of cyberbullying victims, according to Olenek Shemesh ETAL 2017. How might the bystander effect play a role in school or workplace bullying? More recent research suggests that things are not as bleak as these events suggest, according to Liebst ETAL 2021 and Philpott ETAL 2020. Researchers report that people will lend a hand if their resources allow for it. For example, following a natural disaster, people are inclined to help others in distress, especially if they have not sustained damage to their own property, according to Vardy and Atkinson 2019. In extremely dangerous situations, bystanders are actually more likely to help, even if there is more than one person watching. More dangerous situations are recognized and interpreted quickly as being such, leading to faster intervention and help, according to Fisher ETAL 2011. If we want to increase the likelihood of bystanders getting involved in stopping violence, we need to find ways to encourage emotional empathy. This is particularly important for boys, some of whom may need specific training on how to recognize signs of distress in others. Recognize signs of distress in others. According to Laskino and Jenkins 2018, page 305. Learn more about the bystander effect in Figure 12.4 and discover factors that increase helping behavior in Table 12.3. Figure 12.4, understanding the bystander effect. When you first encounter an emergency, you immediately feel personal distress and experience a reflexive response that causes you to avoid the situation or freeze. This response, which is accompanied by decreased activation in the two brain areas highlighted in the scans above, is enhanced when other bystanders are present. Following this initial reaction, you may feel sympathy, which increases your tendency to offer help, according to Hortensius and D. Gelder, 2018. The first photo, labeled "No Bystanders," shows a person who is about to collapse on the floor. The second photo, labeled "One Bystander," shows a man walking past the person lying on the ground. The third photo, labeled "Two Bystanders," shows two men walking past the person lying on the ground. And the fourth photo, labeled "Four Bystanders," shows four men walking past a person lying on the ground. The CT scan has the pre- and post-central gyrus and medial prefrontal cortex labeled in two pairs of lateral and superior views of the brain. The pre- and post-central gyrus set shows the lateral view of the brain with a highlighted region on the frontal lobe just before the parietal lobe, and the superior view of the brain with a highlighted region on the frontal lobe just before the parietal lobe of the right hemisphere. The medial prefrontal cortex set shows sagittal view of brain with highlighted region of the front portion of the frontal lobe, and inferior view of brain with a highlighted mid-region on the frontal lobe of left hemisphere. Table 12.3, why lend a hand? Why people help? Explanation. Why people help? Kin selection. Explanation. We are more likely to help those who are close relatives, as it might promote the survival of our genes, according to Gray and Brogdon, 2017, and Hamilton, 1964. Why people help? Empathy. Explanation. We assist others to reduce their distress, according to Batson and Powell, 2003. Why people help? Social exchange theory. Explanation. We help when the benefits of our good deeds outweigh the costs, according to Crapanzano, ETAL, 2017, and Thibaut and Kelly, 1959. Why people help? Reciprocal altruism. Explanation. We help those whom we believe can return the favor in the future, according to Braze, 2017, and Travers, 1971. Why people help? Mood. Explanation. We tend to help others when our mood is good, but we also help when our spirits are low, knowing that this behavior can improve our mood, according to Batson and Powell, 2003, Schnall, ETAL, 2010. Listed here are some of the reasons people assist each other in times of need. Aggression, the ultimate insult. When Julius attended high school in Uganda's capital city of Kampala, he never told his classmates that he had been kidnapped by the LRA. I would not tell them or anybody that I was a child soldier, he says. Had the other students known, they might have called him a rebel, one of the most derogatory terms you can use to describe a person in Uganda. Calling someone a rebel is like saying that individual is worthless. You're poor. You do not know anything. You're a killer, Julius says. You feel that kind of pain inside you when they call you a rebel within your country. L09, define aggression and identify some of its causes. Using derogatory labels is one form of aggression. Psychologists define aggression as intimidating or threatening behavior or attitudes intended to hurt someone. Aggression does not always manifest as overt physical violence. It may be expressed through put-downs that are small, common, and sometimes ambiguous. According to Williams, 2020, page 3, these microaggressions may seem subtle, but they accumulate and cause great pain for those on the receiving end. Being a target of repeated microaggressions can feel like death by 1,000 cuts. According to Vassell, 2020, paragraph 10. Table 12.4 describes some examples of microaggressions against people of color and other targets. Table 12.4 examples of microaggressions. Example, underlying hostile message. Someone says to a person of color, "What are you?" or "Where are you from?" Underlying hostile message, the person is other and doesn't belong in this country. Example, a coworker tells a female employee to calm down when she simply disagrees with a decision. Underlying hostile message, the person is emotional because she is a woman. Example, a retail employee follows a person of color around a store. Underlying hostile message, the person is assumed to be a thief because of their race. Example, a teacher assumes that an Asian student is good at math. Underlying hostile message, the person is boxed into a smart Asian stereotype. Example, a restaurant patron assumes that a person of color is a server or a busser. Underlying hostile message, the person is assumed to be a service employee because of their race. Example, someone asks a gay person what made them choose to have same-sex partners. Underlying hostile message, the person is assumed to have control over their sexual orientation. Example, someone feels uncomfortable around a person who is blind and ignores them. Underlying hostile message, the person is somehow incomplete because they have a disability. A microaggression is a subtle, sometimes unconscious statement or behavior that reveals a hostile attitude toward a certain group of people. Listed here are some examples of microaggressions and the hostile messages they may reveal, according to Luai and Quezada, 2019. Information from Luai and Quezada, 2019. Aggressive tendencies seem to be rooted in our genes. Studies comparing identical and fraternal twins suggest that aggression runs in families. Identical twins who have nearly all the same genes are more likely than fraternal twins to share aggressive traits, according to Bezjian, ETAL 2011, and Porsche 2016. Porsche ETAL 2016. Some research on identical twins suggests that approximately 50 to 68% of the variation in aggressive behavior in the population can be explained by genetic factors, according to Delala, 2002, Lubke, ETAL 2018, and Tackett, ETAL 2009. Hormones and neurotransmitters may also play a role, with high levels of testosterone and low levels of serotonin correlating with aggression in some cases, according to Eugenio, ETAL 2020, Glenn, ETAL 2011, and Montoya, ETAL 2012. According to the frustration-aggression hypothesis, we all can exhibit aggressive behavior when placed in a frustrating situation, according to Dollard, ETAL 1939. Connections in other chapters, we note that identical twins share 100% of their genetic material at conception, whereas fraternal twins share approximately 50%. Here we note that identical twins are more likely than fraternal twins to share aggressive traits. Expressions of aggression may be influenced by gender. Some researchers have reported that males tend to show more direct aggression, physical displays of aggression. For example, males are identified as perpetrators in the majority of violent crimes, about 80% according to some government statistics, Bureau of Justice Statistics 2022, and Office for National Statistics 2021. Violence may be more common among males, but females can be aggressive too. Some researchers report that females exhibit more relational aggression, or aggressive behaviors that are indirect and aimed at relationships, such as spreading rumors or excluding certain group members, although males clearly exhibit this type of aggression as well, according to Archer and Coyne 2005, Cuppins et al. 2013, and Valencourt 2013. In fact, some evidence suggests that males in many parts of the world display more relational aggression than females, according to Fulgaridou and Kokinos 2023. Many environmental factors seem to set the stage for aggression, among them childhood abuse and exposure to trauma. Such events could potentially trigger epigenetic changes that can alter the expression of genes, including those that influence behavior, according to Provencal et al. 2015. Risk factors for aggression can also occur on a global scale, affecting many people simultaneously. For example, hotter weather resulting from human-induced climate change may lead to increased levels of aggression around the world. As a general trend, violence increases as climates become hotter. According to Renderu et al. 2018, page 113. Connections. In the Human Development chapter, we introduce epigenetics, a field that examines processes involved in the development of phenotypes. Environmental factors can trigger epigenetic changes and thereby influence which genes are turned on or turned off. Here we discuss how early childhood experiences may cause epigenetic changes that could potentially pave the way for aggressive behaviors. Greener spaces, lower crimes. What would happen if you went into a major city and converted hundreds of abandoned land parcels into green spaces with freshly planted grass and trees? Researchers conducted such an experiment, and the effects were striking. Gun violence, burglary, and other crimes declined substantially, and residents felt safer and spent more time outside. The investment required was relatively minor, $5 per square meter of land, but the payoff was major. Direct changes to vacant urban spaces may hold great promise in directly breaking the urban cycle of violence, fear, and abandonment, and doing so in a cost-effective way that has broad citywide scalability, according to Brannis et al. 2008. According to Brannis et al. 2018, page 2950. Stereotypes and discrimination. LO10 defines stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination. Typically, we associate aggression with behavior, but it can also exist in the mind, coloring our attitudes about people and things. This is evidenced by the existence of stereotypes, the conclusions or inferences we make about people who are different from us, based on their group membership, race, religion, age, or gender, for example. Stereotypes are often negative. Blondes are airheads, but they can also be perceived as positive. People who wear glasses are smart. Either way, stereotypes can be harmful, according to Jackson 2020. The stereotypical college instructor is absent-minded, absorbed in thought, and unapproachable. The quintessential motorcycle rider is covered in tattoos. The teenager with the tongue ring is rebelling against her parents, and most mass shooters are mentally ill. What do all these stereotypes have in common? They are not objective or grounded in empirical research. Stereotypes typically include a variety of predicted behaviors and traits that are rooted in subjective observations and value judgments. Violin plus viola plus hip-hop equals good music. When most people think of hip-hop, they don't picture classically trained musicians playing string instruments. Will B on the left and Kev Marcus of Black Violin are challenging stereotypes about hip-hop artists and showing the world that violins and violas do have a place in the genre. Their most recent album, Take These Stairs, earned a Grammy nomination for Best Contemporary Instrumental Album, according to blackviolin.net 2020. Groups and social identity evolutionary psychologists suggest that Stereotypes have allowed human beings to quickly identify the group to which they belong, according to Liddell et al. 2012. An adaptive trait given that groups provide safety, but because we are inclined to think our group is superior, we may draw incorrect conclusions about members of other groups or outsiders in general. We tend to perceive the world in terms of the in-group, the group to which we belong or us, and the out-group, those outside our group or them. Those in the out-group are particularly vulnerable to becoming scapegoats. A scapegoat is the target of negative emotions, beliefs, and behaviors during periods of major stress, such as an economic crisis. Scapegoats are often blamed for undesirable social situations like high unemployment. In the 1930s and 1940s, German dictator Adolf Hitler blamed Jewish people for the country's problems, and this scapegoating led to unconscionable treatment of the Jewish population. Our affiliation with an in-group helps us form a social identity or view of ourselves within a social group, and this process begins at a very young age, but if we only associate with certain crowds, we may be prone to ethnocentrism, or observing the world from the narrow perspective of our own group. This term is often used in reference to cultural groups, yet it can apply to any group. Think of football teams, political parties, college rivals, or nations. We tend to perceive our own country or group as the one that is worthy of emulation. This type of group identification can lead to discrimination or showing favoritism or hostility to others because of their group affiliation. Prejudice. Discrimination is closely tied to prejudice, hostile or negative attitudes toward individuals or groups. Infographic 12.3. While some would argue that racial prejudice has declined in the United States over the last half-century, there is considerable evidence that racism persists. According to Roberts and Rizzo, 2021, racism is a system of advantage based on race that is created and maintained by an interplay between psychological factors, i.e., important example, biased thoughts, feelings, and actions, and socio-political factors, i.e., important example, biased laws, policies, and institutions, according to Roberts and Rizzo, 2021, page 476. In other words, racism is embedded in the minds of individual people and imbued through society at large. Negative attitudes also persist when it comes to sexual orientation, disabilities, and religious beliefs, according to Carr et al. 2012, Dovidio et al. 2002, Infographic 12.3, Thinking About Other People. Introductory text reads, attitudes are complex and only sometimes related to our behaviors. Like most attitudes, prejudicial attitudes can be connected with our cognition about groups of people, also known as stereotypes. Our negative attitudes and feelings about others, also referred to as prejudice, and our behaviors discriminating against others. Understanding how and when these pieces connect to each other is an important goal of social psychology. Jane Elliott's classic Blue Eyes, Brown Eyes exercise helps demonstrate how stereotypes, discrimination, and prejudice may be connected. A flowchart beginning with the text prejudicial attitude toward others has three components as follows: cognitive component, beliefs, and ideas. We tend to categorize people in terms of the in-group, the group to which we belong, and the out-group, people different from us in some way. Stereotypes are beliefs or assumptions we hold about people based on perceived differences we think describe members of their group. Stereotypes are beliefs or assumptions we hold about people based on perceived differences we think describe members of their group. Below is the heterostereotype and two illustrations. The dashed box at the bottom The dashed box at the top has 11 pairs of brown eyes arranged in 3 rows and 4 columns. Text below reads, cleaner, more civilized, smarter. The dashed box at the bottom has 17 pair of blue eyes arranged in 5 rows and 4 columns, and a corresponding call-out reads, when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in 1968, a teacher named Jane Elliott gave her students a lesson about discrimination. Because no African Americans lived in their Iowa town, she knew students would have trouble understanding what motivated the terrible act. Elliott invited the class to join her in an exercise in which one set of students was segregated into a negatively stereotyped outgroup. Suppose we divide the class into blue eyes people and brown eyed people. Left bracket B, right bracket, brown-eyed people are better than blue-eyed people. They are cleaner, ellipsis, more civilized, ellipsis, smarter. According to Peter, 1971, page 20 to 21. Affective component, emotional evaluation, prejudice or feelings of hostility, anger, or discomfort toward members of outgroups. Text pointing to the word prejudice reads, social psychologists often use prejudice to refer to both these negative attitudes and the negative feelings tied to them. Below is the header, prejudice, with a Venn diagram in which the left circle is labeled prejudice and its accompanying text reads, brown eyes dislike blue eyes but have to be nice while in class. The circle at the right is labeled discrimination and its accompanying text reads, brown eyes who are required to sit at the front of the room do not sit with blue eyes, who must sit at the back. Text in the overlapping area reads, brown eyes dislike blue eyes and exclude them from games at recess. A call out below, the illustration reads, in her exercise, Elliott created a situation in which discrimination initially existed without the presence of actual feelings of hostility or anger. Although prejudice and discrimination often go hand in hand, either condition can exist independently. Behavioral component, the way we respond. Discrimination or treating others differently because of their affiliation with a group can include showing hostility or anger to others, or can be more subtle, such as different body language or tone of voice. Below is the header, discrimination, with a black and white photo that shows a teacher sitting in front of children in a classroom. A call out below, the photo reads, during the exercise, a list of rules govern behavior for both groups. For example, only children with brown eyes were allowed to sit at the front of the room near the teacher. The effect of this manufactured discrimination surprised even Elliott. The brown-eyed children quickly became openly hostile toward the blue-eyed children, and the blue-eyed children were miserable. Their entire attitudes were those of defeat. Their classroom work regressed sharply from that of the day before, according to Peters, 1971, page 25. Most of us like to believe we are free of prejudice, but it often occurs outside awareness. Implicit bias is a type of unconscious bias that reveals itself through our behavior toward members of particular social groups, but we remain oblivious to its influence, according to Banerjee and Greenwald, 2013, page XII. For example, a bank teller may believe they treat every client equally, be they black, white, Asian, or Hispanic, but a closer look at their behaviors, the warmth they show in their body language, facial expressions, and subtle choices in wording may reveal otherwise. Researchers have used a variety of tasks to uncover these unconscious attitudes, according to ITO, ETAL 2015, Jackson 2020, some of which you can try online. In your browser, type in key terms like implicit association test online and find out what comes up. How can implicit bias be reduced? We can start by trying to consider members of an outgroup in a positive light, perceiving a helpful person or a wealthy person as opposed to someone in that group. For example, according to Gonzalez, ETAL 2017, and Lee, ETAL 2018. When it comes to race, we should remember that labels like black and white are social categories rather than biological distinctions, according to Gannon 2016, Roberts and Rizzo 2021. Indeed, scientists believe that race is neither a relevant nor accurate way to understand or map human genetic diversity, according to Udell et al. 2016, page 564. Do you know that two people of different races, for example, black and white, can be more genetically similar than two people of the same race, according to Witherspoon et al. 2007. Evidence suggests that prejudice may diminish when people are forced to work together. Evidence suggests that prejudice may diminish when people are forced to work together toward a common goal, according to Musa 2020 and Palak and Clark 2020. In the early 1970s, U.S. psychologist Elliot Aronson and colleagues developed the notion of a jigsaw classroom. Teachers in their study created exercises that required all students to complete individual tasks. Teachers in their study created exercises that required all students to complete their individual tasks, the results of which would fit together like a jigsaw puzzle. The students began to realize the importance of working cooperatively to reach a goal. Ultimately, every contribution was an essential piece of the puzzle, and this resulted in all the students feeling valuable. According to Aronson, ND, stereotype threat, stereotypes, discrimination, and prejudice are conceptually related to stereotype threat, a situational threat in which a person is aware of negative expectations from others. This leads to a fear of being judged or treated as inferior, and it can actually undermine performance in a specific area associated with the stereotype, according to Barber et al. 2020 and Steele 1997. Black college students are often the targets of racial stereotypes about poor academic abilities. This can lead to lowered performance on tests designed to measure ability and to a disidentification with the role of student, taking on the attitude, I am not a student. Interestingly, a person does not have to believe the stereotype is accurate in order to be impacted, according to Steele 1997-2010. One way to counteract this disidentification, which disproportionately impacts male students, is by building trusting, positive relationships among students and faculty, according to McLean and Coakley 2017, page 131. There is a great deal of variation in how people react to stereotype threats, according to Block et al. 2011. Some fend off the stereotype by working harder to disprove it. Others feel discouraged and respond by getting angry, either overtly or quietly. Still others seem to ignore the threats. These resilient types appear to bounce back and grow from the negative experience. When confronted with a stereotype, they redirect their responses to create an environment that is more inclusive and less conducive to stereotyping. Institutions can take steps to reduce the negative impact of stereotype threat. For example, colleges may include visual representations of diversity to blur group boundaries, promote social belonging, and provide in-group role models and recruitment materials, according to Liu et al. 2021, page 21. Unfortunately, stereotypes are pervasive in our society. Just contemplate all the positive and negative stereotypes associated with certain lines of work. Lawyers are greedy, truck drivers are overweight, and dare we say, psychologists are manipulative. Can you think of any negative stereotypes associated with prison guards? As you read the next feature, think about how stereotypes can come to life when people fail to step back and reflect on their behaviors. Didn't see that coming. The Stanford Prison, August 1971, Philip Zimbardo of Stanford University launched what would become one of the most controversial experiments in the history of psychology. Zimbardo and his colleagues carefully selected 24 male college students to play the roles of prisoners and guards in a simulated prison setup in the basement of Stanford University's psychology building. Those chosen for the experiment were deemed normal average by the researchers, who administered several psychological tests according to Haney et al. 1973, page 90. After being arrested in their homes by Palo Alto police officers, the prisoners were searched and booked at a local police station and then sent to the prison at Stanford. The experiment was supposed to last for 2 weeks, but the behavior of some guards and prisoners was so disturbing that the researchers abandoned the study after just 6 days. Haney and Zimbardo, 1998, certain guards became abusive, punishing the prisoners, stripping them naked, and confiscating their mattresses. It seemed as if they had lost sight of the prisoners' humanity as they ruthlessly wielded their newfound power. As one guard stated, looking back, I'm impressed how little I felt for them, according to Haney et al. 1973, page 88. Some prisoners became passive and obedient, accepting the guards' cruel treatment. Others were released early due to extreme emotional depression, crying, rage, and acute anxiety, page 81. How can we explain this fiasco? The guards and prisoners, it seemed, took their assigned social roles way too far. Social roles are the positions we hold in social groups and all the associated responsibilities and expectations. These roles guide our behavior in ways we may not even realize. Prison horrors. On the top, prisoners in Zimbardo's 1971 prison experiment are forced to wear bags over their heads. On the bottom, in 2023, an Abu Ghraib detainee lies on the floor attached to a leash. The treatment of prisoners in the Stanford prison and the Abu Ghraib facility was disturbingly similar. In both cases, authority figures threatened, abused, and forced inmates to be naked. Those in charge seemed to derive pleasure from violating and humiliating other human beings, according to Haney et al. 1973 and Hirsch 2004. The prison experiment may have shed light on the power of social roles, but its validity has come under fire. Critics suggest that the participants were merely acting out of their stereotypic images of guards and prisoners and behaving in accordance with the researchers' expectations, according to Benuazizi and Movahezhidi, 1975, page 159. As one guard explained, decades later, Zimbardo knew what he wanted and then tried to shape the experiment to fit the conclusion that he had already worked out. He wanted to be able to say that people would turn on each other just because they're given a role and given power, according to Rat Nisar, 2011, paragraph 30. Apparently, Zimbardo made his expectations quite clear, instructing the guards to deny the prisoners privacy, freedom, and individuality, according to Zimbardo, 2007. Without this type of guidance, do you think the study outcome would have been the same? Perhaps not, as guards in other prison studies exhibited very different behaviors, according to Griggs and Whitehead, 2014, Haslam and Richer, 2012. In the BBC prison study, for instance, guards were reluctant to impose their authority. Meanwhile, prisoners began to mock, challenge, and undermine the guards, and some orchestrated a breakout, according to Haslam and Richer, 2012, page 159. Complicating matters further, one of the prisoners from the original study now insists that he staged a mental Complicating matters further, one of the prisoners from the original study now insists that he staged a mental meltdown just so he could get home and study for his graduate record examination, or GRE, according to Toppy, 2018. Yet that same participant, who went on to become a prison psychologist, interestingly, had previously indicated that the prison study caused significant distress for the participants. The Stanford prison was a very benign prison situation, and it still caused guards to become sadistic and prisoners to become hysterical. Prison Experiment 2018, 2 minutes and 6 seconds through 2000. 2 minutes and 6 seconds through 2 minutes and 8 seconds. The Stanford Prison Experiment has been criticized for many reasons, including questionable ethics, bias in selecting participants, and failure to adequately explain why participants responded differently to their assigned roles, according to Craig's 2014A. Nevertheless, this study continues to be relevant. In 2004, news broke that U.S. soldiers and intelligence officials at Iraqi's Abu Ghraib prison had beaten, sodomized, and forced detainees to commit degrading sexual acts, according to Hirsch 2004. The similarities between Abu Ghraib and the Stanford prison are noteworthy. The similarities between Abu Ghraib and the Stanford prison are noteworthy, according to Zimbardo 2007. Much of this chapter has focused on negative aspects of human behavior such as obedience, stereotyping, and discrimination. While we cannot deny the existence of these phenomena, we believe they are overshadowed by the goodness that lies within every one of us. Show what you know. Question number 1. Blank is the tendency for people to stand by and do nothing in an emergency because they assume someone else will step in to help. Is the answer A, group polarization, B, disidentification, C, the bystander effect, or D, individualization? The answer is C, the bystander effect. Question number 2, name and describe the 2 types of aggression that may be influenced by gender. Males tend to show more direct aggression, physical displays of aggression, whereas females are more likely to engage in relational aggression, although males clearly exhibit this type of aggression as well, perhaps because females have a higher risk for physical or bodily harm than males do. 3. Students often have difficulty identifying how the concepts of stereotype, discrimination, and prejudice are related. How would you explain their similarities and differences? Answers will vary, but may be based on the following information. Discrimination is showing favoritism or hostility to others because of their affiliation within a group. Prejudice is holding hostile or negative attitudes toward an individual or group. Stereotypes are conclusions or inferences we make about people who are different from us based on their group membership, such as their race, religion, Stereotypes are conclusions or inferences we make about people who are different from us based on their group membership, such as their race, religion, age, or gender. Discrimination, prejudice, and stereotypes involve making assumptions about others we may not know. They often lead to unfair treatment of others. Pro-social behavior, attraction, and love. Julius, make it happen. We believe that all human beings are capable of pro-social behavior or behavior aimed at benefiting others. An exemplar of this ability is Julius Achone. After meeting the orphaned children in 2003, Julius kept his promise to assist them, wiring his family $150 a month. After meeting the orphaned children in 2003, Julius kept his promise to assist them, wiring his family $150 a month to cover the cost of food, clothing, and other necessities, even when he and his wife were struggling to support themselves. For 3 years, Julius was the children's sole source of financial support. Then, in 2007, he formalized his efforts by creating the Achone Uganda Children's Fund, AUCF, a nonprofit organization dedicated to improving the living conditions of children in the rural areas of northern Uganda. Julius currently lives in Uganda, where he oversees the work of the AUCF and represents his home district in the Ugandan parliament, similar to the Senate in the United States. Beautiful children. Julius runs alongside children from Uganda's Otuk district, home to the Christina Akuma Achon Health Center, a medical clinic created by Julius' nonprofit organization. A medical clinic created by Julius's nonprofit organization, the AUCF. The center is named after Julius's mother, who was shot by the LRA in 2004 and died from her wounds because she lacked access to proper medical care. For more information about Julius and the AUCF, please go to http @UgandaChildren.org or read The Boy Who Runs, a book by John Brandt, 2016. As for the 11 children, they are flourishing. Most of them have completed high school and gone on to college. One has worked as a nurse at the medical clinic created by the AUCF, and another has run Most of them have completed high school and gone on to college. One has worked as a nurse at the medical clinic created by the AUCF, and another has run competitively like Julius. On the upside, LO11, describe altruism. It feels good to give to others, even when you receive nothing in return. The satisfaction of knowing you made someone feel happier, more secure, or appreciated is enough of a reward. Helping others with no expectation of payback is called altruism. A major component of altruism is empathy, the ability to recognize and understand another's emotional point of view. Humans may not be the only creatures capable of empathy. Research suggests that animals as diverse as chimpanzees and mice may be able to sense and respond to the distress of others. According to D. Wall, 2018, are toddlers altruistic? The seeds of human altruism may be planted very early in life. One study found that the vast majority of 18-month-olds would help a researcher obtain an out-of-reach object, assist them in a book stacking exercise, and open a door for them when their hands were full. The babies only helped when it appeared assistance was needed, according to Warnicken and Tomasello, 2006. Although altruism is apparent in babies, it is selective from the start. Rather than helping just anyone, they show a preference for those who are familiar and those who have been kind to them in the past. According to Wynn ETAL 2018, page 3, findings from twin studies suggest considerable heritability of altruistic tendencies and other pro-social behaviors, according to Jiang ETAL 2013. But as always, we must consider the biopsychosocial perspective, that is, recognize the interaction of genetics, environment, and culture, according to Knafo and Israel 2010. A secret to happiness. Helping, caring, and showing generosity toward others may reduce stress and increase happiness, according to Aknan ETAL 2020, Cohen ETAL 2015, and Schwartz ETAL 2003, Schwartz ETAL 2009. The gestures don't have to be grand in order to be altruistic or pro-social. Consider the last time you bought coffee for a colleague without being asked, or gave a stranger a quarter to fill the parking meter. Do you recycle, conserve electricity, and take public transportation? These behaviors indicate an awareness of the need to conserve resources for the benefit of all. Promoting sustainability is an indirect yet very impactful pro-social endeavor. So, too, is changing behaviors to protect others during a disease outbreak. Across the world, pandemic responses and culture, research shows that social distancing, mask wearing, and hand washing help prevent COVID-19 and other infectious diseases. according to GUETAL 2020. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, recommends these and other measures, yet many people don't implement them on a regular basis. CDC 2020, December 31st. Why do some people ignore public health guidelines, putting themselves and others at risk for serious illness? There are many reasons, but culture may be one of them. The United States is, generally speaking, an individualistic society. People are looking out for themselves, and appeals for altruism may not work. According to Kelland and Revel 2020, paragraph 7. In late 2020, young adults aged 20 through 49 were driving most of the COVID transmission, according to Narrated, ETAL 2021. Yet older adults were suffering more. About 80% of COVID deaths were in people age 65 and above, according to Tejada, Vera, and Kramaro 2022. Some would say it was a massive act of intergenerational betrayal, according to Gerson 2021, paragraph 5. Japan is a country with a more collectivist society, where greater emphasis is placed on the community. During the pandemic, widespread masking was the norm in Japan. Perhaps this is because Japanese people were already accustomed to wearing masks from the previous SARS pandemic that impacted Asia many years ago. But the Japanese response may also be motivated by the desire to conform to social norms. Wearing masks can be a symbol of collective confrontation against a pandemic, according to Nakayachi, ETAL 2020, page 3. Pandemics bring out the best and the worst. In the middle of a pandemic, and despite health officials' pleas to practice social distancing to protect vulnerable populations, spring breakers partied on. At the same time, healthcare workers were coming out of retirement and crossing international borders to help in the fight against COVID, putting their own health at risk to help others. This nurse from Canada, on the bottom photo, came to Michigan to lend a hand. Otherness, concern for others, is as much a part of human nature as selfishness, according to Crocker, ETAL 2017, page 301. Even if you're not the type to help strangers, you probably demonstrate pro-social behavior toward your family and close friends. This giving of yourself allows you to experience the most magical element of human existence, love. The psychology of sexiness. To have and to hold. About 8 months after meeting on Tinder, Dennis and Alexa returned to the beach where they first exchanged the words, "I love you." In the middle of goofing around and taking silly pictures, Dennis got down on his knee and pulled out an engagement ring. Alexa was so shocked that she took off running and came back laughing. Their two witnessed the whole moment. In between mouthfuls of sand was Brutus, the French bulldog. It was important for Brutus to be present. After all, his photo was the main reason Alexa responded to Dennis' initial. It was important for Brutus to be present. After all, his photo was the main reason Alexa responded to Dennis's initial message. A few months later, the couple tied the knot in a cozy beach ceremony with 50 of their family members and closest friends watching. Since then, marriage has been treating them well. It is just so fun to have someone to come home to who is excited to hear about all the unimportant details of my day and to share in my victories and my defeats, Alexa says. Dennis is equally content. I get to hang out with my best friend. LO12 identify the 3 major factors contributing to interpersonal attraction. Alexa and Dennis seem to be an ideal match. Their compatibility may be explained by interpersonal attraction, the factors that lead us to form friendships or romantic relationships with others. Among the most important are proximity, exposure, similarity, and physical attractiveness. where close proximity, we would guess that the majority of people in your social circle live nearby. Proximity or nearness plays a significant role in the formation of our relationships. The closer people live geographically, the greater the odds they will meet, spend time together, and establish a bond, according to Festinger, ETAL 1950, Nahimo, and Lawton 1975. One study concluded that sitting in nearby seats and being assigned to the same groups in a college classroom correlate with the development of friendships, according to Back ETAL 2008. In other words, sitting next to someone in class or even in the same row increases the chances you will become friends. Would you agree? Connections. In Chapter 1, we described how researchers examine relationships between variables. A correlation does not necessarily mean one variable causes changes in the other. What other factors might be influencing the development of friendships in the classroom? Mere exposure effect. Repeated interactions with partners may bring us closer together through the mere exposure effect. In other words, the more we are exposed to people, food, jingles, songs, politics, or music, the more positive our reactions become. Researchers have also discovered that repeated negative exposures may lead to stronger distaste. If a person you frequently encounter has annoying habits or uncouth behavior, negative feelings might develop, even if your initial impression was positive, according to Cunningham, ETAL 2005. This can be problematic for romantic partners. All those minor irritations you overlooked early in the relationship can evolve into major headaches. For years, researchers have been asking why the mere exposure effect occurs. The answer is complex, and we still don't have a theoretical model that fully explains the phenomenon, according to Montoya, ETAL 2017. Similarity. Perhaps you have heard the saying, birds of a feather flock together. This statement alludes to the concept of similarity, another factor that contributes to interpersonal attraction, according to Moreland and Zedjunk, 1982. Mori, ETAL 2011. We tend to prefer those who share our interests, viewpoints, values, and other characteristics. Even age, education, and occupation tend to be similar among those who are close, according to Brooks and Neville, 2017, and Lott and Lott, 1965. This phenomenon may be driven by our tendency to seek out people whose essential self or overall essence mirrors our own. If someone shares some of our characteristics, we may assume they resemble us on a deeper level and perceive the world as we do, according to Chu and Lowry, 2023. Physical attractiveness. We probably don't need to tell you that physical attractiveness plays a major role in interpersonal attraction, according to Eastwick, ETAL 2011. Fisher and Stinson, 2020, and Liu and Zhang, 2009. When considering romantic prospects, people generally look for those who are kind, healthy, and committed, but physical appearance is also important, especially for males, according to Scheller, ETAL 2023, page 299. But here's the question: is beauty really in the eye of the beholder? In other words, do people from different cultures and historical periods have different concepts of beauty? There is some degree of consistency in the way people rate facial attractiveness, according to Langlois, ETAL 2000, and Sutherland, ETAL 2018, with facial symmetry generally considered attractive, according to Boothroyd, ETAL 2014, and Grammer and Thornhill, 1994. But certain aspects of beauty do appear to be culturally distinct, according to Gangestad and Shade, 2005. In some parts of the world, people go to great lengths to elongate their necks, increase their height, pierce their bodies, augment their breasts, and enlarge or reduce the size of their waists, just so others within their culture will find them attractive. Why is physical attractiveness so important? Beauty may be a sign of health, and healthy people have greater potential for longevity and successful reproduction. Sexy stubble or dirty beards. Actor Reggie Jean Page sports some stubble on the red carpet. What do females find most attractive? A face that is cleanly shaven, fully bearded, or somewhere in between? According to research, heavy stubble wins the sexiness prize. Full beards, on the other hand, tend to be associated with parenting ability and healthiness. According to Dixon and Brooks 2013, page 236. Beauty perks. We have discussed beauty in the context of attraction, but how does physical appearance affect other aspects of social existence? For some people, being physically attractive may come with advantages. A study of college students found correlations between facial attractiveness and characteristics associated with well-being, such as high self-esteem and low anxiety. According to Costa and Maestrapiri, 2023. Good-looking children and adults are viewed as more intelligent and competent and are treated better in general, according to Han and Laurent, 2023. Langlois ETAL 2000. Why would this be? From the perspective of evolutionary psychology, these beauty characteristics are good indicators of reproductive potential. Our evaluations of beautiful people may also be influenced by the halo effect, or the tendency to assign excessive importance to one dimension of a person. As early psychologist Edward Thorndike pointed out, people tend to form general impressions early on and then cling to them, even in the absence of supporting evidence or the presence of contradictory evidence, according to Aronson, 2018. Good-looking people do not always inspire positive reactions. However, people tend to associate beauty with the immoral vice of vanity. This helps explain why attractive people are sometimes viewed as lacking morality, according to Han and Laurent, 2023. Research suggests that other women may respond with hostility and resentment when exposed to women who are more beautiful than themselves, especially when those attractive females wear makeup, according to Del Prior, ETAL 2018, page 363. Our initial impressions of people's beauty may lead us to assume they have positive characteristics like superior intelligence, popularity, and desirability, but it also may lead to enmity when we feel others are working too hard to be beautiful. We have learned about some of the factors that increase the odds of romantic attraction, but how do we know whether a relationship will last beyond the dating stage? Some people think first impressions offer important clues. Think critically. I knew the moment she walked into the room that I was going to marry her. You've probably heard stories like this, and perhaps you have experienced it yourself. But is love at first sight a real phenomenon? Probably not. Evidence suggests if you are overcome with a feeling of immediate love, the moment you meet someone, it's more likely you are experiencing an intense physical attraction, according to Zizok, ETAL 2017. In other words, you find the person very, very sexy. Instant connection. Musical artist Ricky Martin reportedly experienced love at first sight when he met his now ex-husband, Jawan Yosef, according to Butcher, 2018. But research suggests that love does not work this way, according to Eastwick, ETAL 2018. Zizok, ETAL 2017. Is it possible that Martin already loved Yosef when the two first met in person? For the 6 months leading up to that moment, they had been getting to know each other via Instagram, according to Butcher, 2018. If love at first sight were really a thing, you would expect the early stages of long-term relationships to look fundamentally different from those of short-term unions. The love at first sight couples should report different experiences than those in relationships that fizzle out. Yet the beginning stages of long and short-term unions look very similar. According to Eastwick ETAL 2018, magical first impressions aren't totally meaningless, however. People who remember being swept off their feet when they met their partner tend to have more love and passion in the relationship. Zisok ETAL 2017, page 882. Perhaps the initial spark of physical attraction turns into a flame that sustains the couple over time. What is love? In the United States, we are taught to believe that love is the foundation of marriage. People in Western cultures do tend to marry for love, but this is not the case everywhere. In Harare, Zimbabwe, for example, people might also marry for reasons associated with family needs, such as maintaining alliances and social status. According to Waj Sisiki ETAL 2010, or for religious reasons, Hallforce ETAL 2016. Similarly, many marriages in India and other parts of South Asia are arranged by family members. Love may not be present in the beginning stages of such unions, but it can blossom. Sternberg's theory of love. In a pivotal study published in 1986, U.S. psychologist Robert Sternberg proposed that love is made up of three elements: passion, feeling leading to romance and physical attraction; intimacy, feeling close; and commitment, the recognition of love. A combination of connection, passion, care, and intimacy is what Sternberg called romantic love. As a relationship grows, companionate love emerges. This consists of profound fondness, camaraderie, understanding, and emotional closeness. Companionate love is typical of a couple that has been together for many years. They become comfortable with each other, routines set in, and passion often fizzles. According to Aronson 2018, consummate love occurs when intimacy and commitment are accompanied by passion. Research and life experience tells us that relationships inevitably change. Romantic love is generally what drives people to commit to one another, according to Bershid 2010. But the passion of this stage generally decreases over time. Can you think of ways that passion might be rekindled? Companionate love, in contrast, tends to grow over time. As we experience life with a partner, it is companionate love that seems to endear us to one another. Bershid 2010. Cultivating this type of love may confer both emotional and physical benefits. Did you know that having a happy spouse is associated with a longer lifespan? According to Stavrova 2019, Connections in the Sensation and Perception chapter, we discuss sensory adaptation, which occurs when sensory receptors become less sensitive to constant stimuli. In the learning chapter, we present the concept of habituation, a learning process whereby an organism reduces its response to a recurring stimulus. Humans seem to be attracted to novelty, which might underlie our desire for passion. In it for the long haul, couples stay together for many reasons, sometimes out of self-interest, other times for the sake of others. According to S. Joel ETAL 2018, the investment model of commitment focuses on the resources at stake in relationships, including finances, possessions, time spent together, and perhaps even children. Russ Bolt, 1983. According to this model, decisions to stay together or separate are based on happiness, with the relationship ideas of what life would be like without it, and personal investment. Sometimes people stay in unsatisfying or unhealthy relationships because they feel they have too much to lose or no better alternatives, according to Russ Bolt and Martz 1995. Others are reluctant to break up because they worry about their partner's level of dependence. According to S. Joel ETAL 2018, the ability to deal with relationship troubles may depend somewhat on perceptions of what the relationship represents. Do you view your relationship as something that was written in the stars, destined to happen, or more like a long journey you embark upon together? According to North 2014, it may be romantic for lovers to think they were made for each other, but it backfires when conflicts arise and reality pokes the bubble of perfect unity. According to Lee and Schwartz, 2014, page 64, a better approach may be to consider your love a journey, one that might have twists and turns, but ultimately is moving toward a destination. Page 64. At last, we reach the end of our journey through social psychology. Hopefully, you can use what you have learned in your everyday social interactions. Research suggests you may be better at it than you realize, according to Gall-Witzer and Bark, 2018. Be conscious of the attributions you use to explain the behavior of others. Are you being objective or falling prey to self-serving bias? Bear in mind that attitudes have a powerful impact on behavior. What types of attitudes do you harbor, and how do they impact your everyday decisions? Know that your behaviors are constantly being shaped by your social interactions, both as an individual and as a member of groups. Understand the dangers of prejudice, discrimination, and stereotyping, and know the human suffering caused by aggression. But perhaps most of all, be kind and helpful to others, and allow yourself to experience love. Young love, Dennis and Alexa tied the knot on a beautiful beach in San Diego on March 25th, 2017. The couple then moved to 29 Palms, a remote desert base in California. The town is small, the weather is terrible, and we are miles and miles away from the comforts we're used to, says Alexa. But we are really enjoying the uninterrupted time we get to spend together on what we are calling our couples retreat. Video profile, Julius. You asked, they answered. Show what you know. Question number 1. Julia sent money home every month to help cover the cost of food, clothing, and schooling for the 11 orphaned children. This is a good example of A, the just world hypothesis, B, de-individualization, C, individualistic behavior, or D, pro-social behavior. The answer is D, pro-social behavior. Question number 2, we describe how the investment model of commitment can be used to predict the long-term stability of a romantic relationship. How can you use this same model to predict the long-term stability of friendships, positions at work, or loyalty to institutions? According to this model, decisions to stay together or part ways are based on how happy people are in their relationship, their notion of what life would be like without it, and their investment in the relationship. People may stay in unsatisfying or unhealthy relationships if they feel there are no better alternatives or believe they have too much to lose. This model helps us understand why people remain in destructive relationships. These principles also apply to friendships, positions at work, or loyalty to institutions. Question number 3. What are the 3 major factors that play a role in interpersonal attraction? Is the answer A, social influence, obedience, physical attractiveness, B, proximity, similarity, physical attractiveness, C, obedience, proximity, social influence, or D, proximity, love, social influence? The answer is B, proximity, similarity, physical attractiveness. Question number 4, blank is helping others with no expectation of something in return. The answer is altruism. Altruism is helping others with no expectation of something in return. Chapter 12, Review. Summary of concepts. LO1, define social psychology and identify how it differs from sociology. Social psychology is the study of human cognition, emotion, and behavior in relation to others. Social psychology focuses on studying individuals in relation to others and groups, whereas sociology studies the groups themselves, their cultures, societies, and institutions. Social psychologists use the same general research methods as other psychologists, but their studies sometimes have an added twist of deception. This deception may involve the use of confederates or people secretly working for the researchers. At the end of a study, researchers debrief participants or review aspects of the research they had previously concealed. LO2, define social cognition and describe how we use attributions to explain behavior. Social cognition refers to the way we think about others, attend to social information, and use this information in our lives, both consciously and unconsciously. Attributions are the beliefs we develop to explain human behaviors and characteristics, as well as situations. Because attributions rely on whatever information happens to be available, our observations of what people say and do, for example, they are vulnerable to personal bias and inaccuracies. LO3 describes several common attribution errors. A situational attribution is a type of external attribution wherein behaviors are assumed to result from situational factors. A dispositional attribution is a type of internal attribution wherein behaviors are thought to result from traits or personality characteristics. Making attributions involves a certain amount of guesswork, and this leaves plenty of room for error. Common mistakes include 1, the fundamental attribution error, the tendency to favor dispositional attributions over situational attributions; 2, the just world hypotheses, the tendency to believe the world is a fair place and people generally get what they deserve; and 3, the self-serving bias, the tendency to attribute success to personal characteristics and failures to environmental factors. LO4, explain the meaning of social influence and recognize factors associated with persuasion. Social influence refers to the way a person is affected by others, as evidenced in behavior, emotion, and cognition. Expectations are a powerful yet often unspoken form of social influence. Research suggests that student performance is impacted by teacher expectations. Persuasion is consciously trying to make people change their attitudes and beliefs, which may or may not lead to changes in their behavior. Persuasive power is determined by three factors: the source, the message, and the audience. LO5 define compliance and explain some of the techniques used to gain it. Compliance occurs when people voluntarily change their behavior at the request or direction of another person or group who generally has no true authority over them. A common method to gain compliance is the foot in the door technique, which occurs when someone makes a small request followed by a larger request. Another method is the door in the face technique, which occurs when someone makes a large request followed by a smaller request. LO6 identify the factors that influence the likelihood of someone conforming. The tendency to modify behaviors, attitudes, beliefs, and opinions to match those of others is known as conformity. There are three major reasons we conform. Most people want approval, to be liked and accepted by others. This desire, known as normative social influence, can have a significant impact on others. We also conform to be correct, looking to others for confirmation when we are uncertain about something, and then doing as they do. This is known as the informational social influence. Finally, we may conform to others because they belong to a certain reference group we respect, admire, or long to join. LO7 describe obedience and explain how Stanley Milgram studied it. Obedience occurs when we change our behavior or act in a way that we might not normally act because we have been ordered to do so by an authority figure. Milgram conducted a series of studies examining how far people would go when urged by an authority figure to inflict punishment on others. During an early experiment, the goal was for the Confederate learner to memorize a set of paired words. The participant teacher sat before a control panel for administering electrical shocks. The teacher was told to administer a shock each time the learner made a mistake, and the shock was to increase by 15 volts for every mistake. An astonishing 60 to 65% of participants continued to the highest voltage level, and similar findings have been produced in subsequent studies around the world. LO8 recognize factors that influence the bystander effect. When a person is in trouble, bystanders tend to assume that someone else will help and therefore stand by and do nothing, partly because there is a diffusion of responsibility. This bystander effect is more likely to occur when many people are present. By contrast, individuals are more inclined to aid a person in distress if no one else is around. LO9 define aggression and identify some of its causes. Aggression is defined as intimidating or threatening behavior or attitudes intended to hurt someone. Research suggests that aggression has a biological basis. For instance, high levels of testosterone and low levels of serotonin correlate with increased aggression. The frustration-aggression hypotheses suggest that we can all show aggressive behavior in frustrating situations. LO10 defines stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination. We tend to perceive the world in terms of the in-group, the group to which we belong, and the out-group, those outside our group. Observing the world from the narrow perspective of our own group may lead to ethnocentrism, which sets the stage for stereotyping and discrimination. Stereotypes are the conclusions or inferences we make about people based on their group membership. Discrimination means showing favoritism or hostility to others because of their affiliation with a group. People who harbor stereotypes are more likely to feel prejudice, that is, hostile or negative attitudes toward individuals or groups. LO11 describe altruism. Altruism is helping others with no expectation of something in return. Empathy, or the ability to recognize and understand another's emotional perspective, is a major component of altruism. Behavior aimed at benefiting others is known as pro-social behavior. LO12 identify the three major factors contributing to interpersonal attraction. Interpersonal attraction leads us to form friendships or romantic relationships. Important factors that influence interpersonal attraction are proximity, similarity, and physical attractiveness. The combination of connection, passion, care, and intimacy is romantic love. As a relationship grows, intimacy and commitment develop into companionate love, which consists of fondness, camaraderie, understanding, and emotional closeness. Consummate love is evident when intimacy, commitment, and passion are all present. Key terms: aggression, altruism, attitudes, attributions, bystander effect, cognitive dissonance, companionate love, compliance, conformity, consummate love, de-individualization, diffusion of responsibility, discrimination, dispositional attribution, door in the face technique, ethnocentrism, false consensus effect, foot in the door technique, frustration, aggression hypotheses, fundamental attribution error, group polarization, groupthink, in-group, interpersonal attraction, just world hypotheses, mere exposure effect, norms, obedience, outgroup, persuasion, prejudice, proximity, romantic love, scapegoat, self-serving bias, situational attribution, social cognition, social facilitation, social identity, social influence, social loafing, social psychology, social roles, stereotypes, stereotype threat. Chapter 13, Stress and Health. The time now is 2:20 a.m. Today is Monday, July 27th, 2026. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.